What is up, everybody? Welcome to Pub Sports Radio and welcome to Stat Diggers. We're going to take a deep dive into the card of the year, UFC 280, 14-fight card, stacked from top to bottom. There is not one bad fight on this card. I'm looking forward to every single one, from the opener of Karol Rosa, Lena Landsberg, all the way to probably my favorite fight of the year, Islam Makhachev going against Charles Oliveira. So looking forward to talking it with Uncle Weezy, with the chat. Uncle Weezy, how are you doing? You looking forward to the card of the year?
Definitely, man. I mean, these last two cards from a talent standpoint have not been great, and we've had 2 out of the last 3 weeks before last week off. We had the Dern against Yan Xiaonan card, which was okay. It was fun from a fan standpoint, but from a talent standpoint, not great. And then we're just coming off the Grasso Araujo card, another one where one of the best fights of the night in Askarov Royval falls off on the weigh-in day, and we're left with another fairly low-level card. And now this is the payoff. Here we come. 2 title fights, some huge names on this card, some amazing talents. Just on the undercard, you got some really great fights. So I can't wait to chop it up. 14 fights we got on this one. And there's just not a bad one, like you said, on the entire card. So such a good one. Welcome everybody back to a real episode of Stat Diggers with some real fights to break down here. It is an absolute pleasure to do it with you. And just so you guys know out there, my man Brady has got COVID for the 17th time this year, and just fresh back from the hospital again. Had orderlies holding him down saying, "We can't do Stat Diggers this week because you're too sick." And he said, "Look, you punks, it's UFC 280. And he went through them like a hot knife through butter, like Joe Anderson Brito went through Lucas Alexander yesterday. And here he is to break down these 14 fights with us. And we should all thank him for that.
Yeah, I would not miss it for the world. Horrible timing, though. Like, why couldn't I have got sick last week for the shitty card last week? But no, got sick this week. But yeah, gonna work our way through it here. Yeah, we're back on the main channel. It feels good to be back on Pub Sports Radio. Welcome back on the main channel. Looking forward to that. If you guys have not already, be sure to leave a like, subscribe here to Pub Sports. Let's keep growing the channel. We are here every Sunday, 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time, breaking down the fights. I do want to shout out the chat, as always, before we get started. We got UFC Shell, first one in the chat. We got Mushroom in the chat. We got Victor DeJesus. We have Propaholic in the chat. We got Bob. We got Lou Betchy. We got Prince of Mischief. We got MMA Fans, Small World, Lifters. We got XX. We got Justin. We got 2. We have Melon hanging out. We got Rob. We got Jeff. And I think I covered about everybody, but yeah, appreciate you guys hanging out. Leave a like. It does go a long way. And I say we get into this 14-fight card. It was supposed to be 15 fights. We were supposed to see Jailton Almeida going against the very handsome Shamil Abdurakhimov, but Shamil made a very good decision in pulling out of that fight. And it will now be Almeida versus Maxim Grishin in November. So, but yeah, 14 fights. Every fight is good. I don't see one bad fight on the card, and we're going to kick it off with Lena Landsberg going against Karol Rosa. Landsberg, she is 40 years old, 5'7", with a 65-inch reach. Karol Rosa, 27 years old, 5'5", with a 67-inch reach. Rosa is going to be 13 years younger. That is extremely significant. And it's going to be Landsberg with a 2-inch height advantage, and then Rosa with a 2-inch reach advantage. Lena Landsberg, she is 2-3 in her last 5 fights, a decision loss against Yana Kunitskaya, a decision win against Tanya Evinger, a decision win against the very handsome Justin Bieber, a.k.a. Macy Chiasson, a decision loss against Sarah McMahon, and then a decision loss against Pani Kienzad. So prior to that Pani Kienzad fight, Landsberg did take off a pretty big layoff there. She had a pregnancy. She came back, and honestly, she looked a lot better than I expected. She actually won a round on all 3 judges' scorecards, getting a knockdown against Pani Kienzad. So she didn't look completely washed in her last fight. I thought she looked good. Karol Rosa, she is 4-1 in her last 5 fights. Laura Procopio, split decision. Vanessa Mello, decision win. Jocelyn Edwards, decision win. Betch Correa, decision win. And then a loss against Sarah McMahon by decision. Pretty tough stylistic matchup there. So yeah, I think it's a good matchup for Karol Rosa. I initially thought about parlaying her last week, looked into the fight, ended up passing. And I'm trying to be really careful with the parlays in general, but especially with like women's MMA chalk. And it's just bit me in the ass so many times, Corey McKenna, Lupe Godinez. And I got to ask myself, like, what could go wrong laying minus 250, minus 260 at this point in Karol Rosa? And the answer to that is probably a lot of things, but she should win this fight. I think on the feet, at range, she's going to be much higher volume than Lena Landsberg. I think for Landsberg to have success, she's going to have to close distance, get this fight in the clinch, and potentially get this fight down to the mat. Lena Landsberg only 5 takedowns, though, in 9 UFC fights. Karol Rosa should be able to keep this upright, keep it at range, and just outstrike Lena Landsberg, the 40-year-old Lena Landsberg. We can't completely count out these 40-year-olds, Weezy. They've been going out there and getting it done. We saw Rafael Assunção pull off a big upset last night. We saw 44-year-old Guido Canetti pull off a big upset as well against Randy Costa. So I don't want to completely count out Lena Landsberg. I don't think she's completely washed or completely done, but stylistically, I feel like this is a very, very, very winnable fight for Karol Rosa. But it's a fight that I'm just content with passing, sitting back and watching, because it's a chalky price tag on Karol Rosa here. So Weezy, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, Karol Rosa's last loss was to a 41-year-old Sarah McMahon, and 2 fights ago, Lena Landsberg lost to a 40-year-old Sarah McMahon. Yeah, these 40-year-olds, if they don't have a ton of tread on the tires, sometimes, and that's the case with somebody like Sarah McMahon, like somebody with Guido Canetti. Not the case with Assunção, but he pulled it off anyway. But yeah, so I mean, like, Rosa's got a nice measurables advantage here because she's 13 years younger and has a 2-inch reach advantage. So both of those are statistically significant. We like that quite a bit. Carol's got the overall experience advantage, but it's Lena Landsberg who has the UFC experience advantage because Rosa's got 3 more fights, 17 more minutes in the pro cage, and almost 1 more year as a pro. But it's Landsberg who has the UFC experience advantage, 4 more UFC level fights, and 45 more minutes in the UFC cage. When it comes to finish stats and durability, I have it even. Both ladies have a 40% finish rate overall as a pro. Rosa's gotten both subs and knockouts, while Landsberg has only finished fights via the KO. Neither lady has finished an opponent at the UFC level, though, so we do kind of like the overs here. Landsberg has been finished in 2 of 5 UFC losses, while Rosa has never been finished at the UFC level. But pre-UFC level, she was finished twice by submission, once by Melissa Gatto. Both ladies have been finished in 50% of their pro losses, Rosa by sub, Landsberg by KO. The striking advantage I'm giving to Karol Rosa here. She's got the much better UFC striking metrics, Brady. She has a 2.2 significant strike differential, while Landsberg's is negative 1.15. So that's the mark of a much better minute winner on the feet. Both ladies are around 55% accurate and both have decent power numbers, but Rosa's knockdowns per 15 is a little bit better when you compare her 0.2 to Landsberg's 0.12. The biggest difference between the two, though, is the volume. This is where we really see Rosa having that statistical advantage in that, Rosa's throwing 12.07 significant strike attempts per minute, while Lena is throwing 4.94. Okay, Lena's opponents throw 2.22 more significant strike attempts per minute than Lena does, while Rosa throws 3.11 more significant strike attempts per minute than her opponents do. Rosa also has the better significant striking defense at 50% to 46%, and Landsberg is dangerous in the clinch with her elbows. So Rosa's probably going to want to be keeping this out at striking distance in order to be more successful. When it comes to the grappling, I'm giving that advantage to Rosa as well. Rosa's metrics are better pretty much everywhere. She's got the better takedown percent, 50% compared to 28% for Landsberg. She's getting more takedowns per 15, like almost twice as many. Slightly more control time, 30.5% for Rosa, 29.1% for Landsberg. And Rosa's also yielding less takedowns per 15 minutes, 1 per 15 minutes to 1.87 for Landsberg. And she's also defending takedowns at a much better rate. 72% takedown defense for Rosa, 48% takedown defense for Landsberg. So Landsberg's fights have been in control time positions about 73% of the time of her 120 minutes in the UFC cage. And Lena's losing about 60% of those control time positions, while Rosa's spending 45% of her 75 minutes in the UFC cage in control time positions, and she's winning about 68% of those exchanges. So all the metrics in the grappling are favoring Rosa here as being the more likely minute winner in these exchanges. And the slight edge goes to Landsberg in the strength of schedule, as we see the 1.1 ratio overall compared to 1 for Rosa, and the slightly more experienced competition. And then when you look at the wins, Rosa's got the better ratio in the wins, but it's Landsberg who's beating the more experienced UFC competition. So in summary, we got Rosa 13 years younger. She's got a 2-inch reach advantage. She's the more versatile finisher. She has the striking and the grappling advantages, and maybe the better strength of schedule metrics in her wins, maybe. Landsberg's 2 inches taller. She's got the overall and the UFC experience advantage and has a slight strength of schedule advantage overall. I mean, I think it's probably Rosa by decision here, dude. What do you think?
Yeah, Rosa by decision. We see that Karol Rosa did open up minus 275. She's currently minus 260. And yeah, I think the overs are great, but they're all over it. Opened up at minus 250 for the over 2.5. It's now minus 275. So it's a hefty price tag, but I think this goes over. I think it's a Karol Rosa decision. Maybe, improving that price tag with that Karol Rosa by decision prop could be something to look at. But, as of now, where the price sits, minus 260, minus 265, minus 255. I think I'm going to pass. When you're laying that much chalk, especially on women's MMA, you have to be very, very, very sure. And I've been burnt on these spots more often than not. So I'm going to sit back probably and pass on this one. But yeah, I think Karol Rosa should win this fight.
Yeah, agreed, man. I mean, unfortunately, the price doesn't seem right anywhere. It seems like this should definitely go to decision, but you don't want to lay minus 275. It seems like Rosa should probably win this fight, but do you really want to lay minus 260 on a women's fight? Hard pass. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, so I do see they have the decision prop right now on what is that, 5 Dimes? Sport Bet 5 Dimes?
Yeah, I think that's a book that has the exact same lines as 5 Dimes.
Yeah, so Sport Bet is showing plus 105 for Karol Rosa by decision. Yeah, I would probably bet that. That's a big difference in that money line.
That is a huge difference. And yeah, Landsberg is being knocked out, and Rosa does have some power, but that seems like a great way to get that minus 260 to even money. And if the over 2.5 is sitting at minus 275, that feels like the best way to play it.
Yeah, so we'll see what like Bet Online and DraftKings and FanDuel, and hopefully all these books get these props out early since it's a big card. I'm expecting them to, so I'm gonna keep my eye out. Yeah, if I can get Karol Rosa by decision at plus money, I think that's something I would then be interested in. But I'm not holding my breath. Probably won't see that line.
What's Landsberg by decision?
So Landsberg by decision is plus 280, which is not much better than that money line.
Yeah. So, I mean, why is Rosa by decision so much better than her money line, but Landsberg isn't? That's kind of weird. Neither one of these ladies has finished a fight at the UFC level, and they both have the exact same finish rate. So, you know what that tells me, Brady? That when people like us, the little people, are able to bet Rosa by decision, we'll get it hung in front of us at a fat flipping these guys off.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to the next fight. Really looking forward to this one. I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gordon. We got Islam Makhachev going against Malcolm Gordon. Makhachev is 22 years old, 5'7", with a 70-inch reach. Malcolm Gordon, 32 years old, 5'7", with a 71-inch reach. Makhachev, 10 years younger, 22 years old, and believe it or not, Weezy, he is not the youngest fighter on the card. Yep. But yeah, both guys are 5'7". Makhachev is going to have a 1-inch reach disadvantage. So Makhachev is 4-0-1 no contest in his last 5 fights. Made his debut against one Cody Durden, had that club and sub victory, very good win there in the first round. And then I thought he had a really good win against Charles Johnson. He was a big favorite in that fight, but Charles Johnson was a pretty tough test. It was a step up for Makhachev. He went out there and he landed like 12, something crazy in terms of the takedowns, control time. And I thought he looked really good in that fight. Malcolm Gordon, he's 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He made his debut against Amir Albazi, got submitted in the very first round by the purple belt, and Albazi got knocked out by Sumadarji the next time out, and then he has back-to-back wins, a decision win against Francisco Figueiredo, and then a knockout win. It was an injury win against Dennis Bonder, where Bonder hurt his arm or his shoulder in a scramble there. But yeah, it's kind of funny when we talk about Malcolm Gordon. When you think about Malcolm Gordon, you think about the chin. You think of guys like Jason Witt, guys like Jordan Wright, and guys like Malcolm Gordon. Y'all put those three guys together in terms of like the worst chin. And I'll say pound for pound, I gotta think, it's so close between Witt and Gordon in terms of who has the worst chin. And I might even lean Gordon just because Gordon is fighting at 125 pounds and this guy's getting starched in fights. Like, I went and watched pretty much the whole career of Malcolm Gordon, and it's hard to find a fight where he's not wobbling all over the place and getting completely flatlined. Like, this guy's chin is a serious concern. And although Muhammad Makhachev is not really a knockout guy, I feel like, Makhachev could potentially knock him out here on the feet. And I feel like he might try to do that. I feel like Makhachev might try to make a statement, come in here, pressure forward. He loves the pressure. He loves to throw hard. And I feel like he can go out there and strike with Malcolm Gordon and potentially knock him out. And then I also feel like I can go out there and take down Malcolm Gordon, who has a 0% takedown defense, and control him, but potentially even submit him. So Malcolm Gordon has been finished in all 5 of his losses, 4 by knockout, 1 by submission, submitted by Amir Albazi by a triangle in the first round. And then he also got knocked out by Sumadarajan a couple times outside the UFC. So yeah, I feel like it's Makhachev can kind of do whatever he wants here if he wants to pressure forward, starch Malcolm Gordon on the feet, with either a flying knee, a big shot. I don't think Malcolm Gordon has the best chin at all. And then if he wants to take down Malcolm Gordon, eventually, get into mount, take his back, I think he can submit Malcolm Gordon. I know Malcolm Gordon's a black belt, but I think Makhachev should be able to handle him pretty accordingly there. So yeah, I like Makhachev quite a bit. No hot take here for me. He is, I believe, the biggest favorite on the card. We're not going to get a good price on this guy for a long time, I think, until he takes a big step up in competition. But I think they're being smart here. He's only 22 years old. They're building him up little by little, and this is a fight that they're trying to build him up even more. So yeah, give me Makhachev to win here, and give me Makhachev to win probably in the first round. Weezy, should be a fun fight here. We have a killer be killed fighter in Malcolm Gordon. All of his fights very exciting. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, fun one. I mean, Makhachev's really he's fun, dude. He's definitely a guy that we're going to be seeing for a very long time. I believe undefeated as a pro and an amateur. I mean, I don't think this guy's ever tasted defeat. So, he's definitely a winner, and he's still only 22 years old, 10 years younger than Malcolm Gordon at this point. But Malcolm, the more traditional measurables advantages here with the 1-inch reach advantage, and he's a switch stance fighter while Makhachev is orthodox. The experience advantage goes to Malcolm Gordon here as he's got 10 more pro fights, almost 30 more minutes in the pro cage, and over 7 more years as a pro fighter. Malcolm also has the UFC experience advantage with 2 more fights and 6 more minutes in the cage. Gordon's got the better finish stats, but obviously it's Makhachev who's more durable. Gordon has the better finish rate as a pro, 79% for Malcolm Gordon, while it's 63% for Makhachev. And both guys have the same finish rate at the UFC level, 50% in their 2 UFC wins. Makhachev has the durability advantage because, literally anybody is more durable than Malcolm Gordon. Jason Witt and Gordon could have that kind of pound for pound who's less durable. And, you'd probably get some pretty, talented cappers picking each one of those guys as being the least durable. So it would be a hotly contested topic, I get the feeling. But the striking advantage, I'm going to give it to Gordon. But here, I don't see this fight taking place much at distance. Makhachev lands less than 1 significant strike per minute, but only in 14 significant strikes landed at the UFC level, he's actually got 1 knockdown. So that's pretty good. Gordon has 0 knockdowns, and Gordon cannot take a punch. Both of these guys have spent less than 33% of their UFC cage time at distance striking. I think maybe Gordon's the better minute winner at range. Like if this were a kickboxing match with no takedowns, I think that Gordon wins, but obviously it's not that. So I don't know what that means, So Makhachev is solid on the feet as well. So I think he will be a lot more likely to take a punch in comparison to Gordon. So maybe that gives him the advantage. But the grappling advantage is all Makhachev. Even though Gordon is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, I see this being all Makhachev in the grappling exchanges. Makhachev spends almost 64% of his 22 UFC minutes in control time positions, and he's winning just under 50% of them, while I'm sorry, that's Gordon, who's winning just under 50% of his time in UFC control positions and winning them, while Makhachev is spending 77.5% of his 16 minutes of control time positions, and he's winning 96% of the control time positions. So in that small sample size, Makhachev is averaging 11.27 takedowns per 15 minutes and 0.94 submission attempts per 15 minutes. And he gets just a shade under 75% control time for. The top time Gordon has gotten was mostly a result of the bad Figgy going for an ill-advised leg lock and getting swept as a result of that at the end of the first round of their fight. And then also because Figgy threw some shitty kick and he fell on his ass, Gordon jumped into his guard and got 3 minutes of control time there. So Gordon's shown 0% takedown defense. So if you're asking which one of these guys has the wrestling chops to get this fight to the ground should they want it there, that's Makhachev all day. It's pretty easy to see Makhachev taking down Malcolm and subbing him or easily winning a 30-26 decision here. The strength of schedule is even at the UFC level, I would say. I'd say Gordon has fought the slightly better level of competition because he has 2 more fights at the UFC level, but the metrics are similar overall and the wins are identical. Makhachev, 10 years younger, more durable, has the striking and the grappling advantages here, while Gordon has a 1-inch reach advantage and is a switch stance fighter and has the overall and the UFC experience advantages. I think it's just an easy win for Makhachev. Don't look too hard to try to find ways that Malcolm Gordon wins this fight because I just don't think that these guys' grappling is anywhere near the same quality, and I think Makhachev easily cruises here.
Yeah, Malcolm Gordon folds like a lawn chair from either punches or takedowns. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like it's a tough matchup for Malcolm Gordon, but the line is obviously indicating that. So we have Makhachev opened up -700, currently -725. Malcolm Gordon opened up +500, currently +525. I was interested in the violence aspect of things. I was hoping since it is a flyweight fight that they would maybe set the over-under at 2.5, but they are very wise to it, setting it at 1.5. The over 1.5 is -135. The under 1.5 is +105. So I'm going to take a look at the alternate 2.5, under 2.5 later in the week. We'll see what that is. But yeah, I still like violence here. I think Makhachev inside the distance is a good look. I think he does really whatever he wants to Gordon and finishes him. And I think it's probably early as well. I just don't think these guys are on the same level at all. So give me Makhachev inside the distance. But yeah, not much we can do with this money line. I mean, it's -750. I think, they got it right.
Yeah, and a couple little things about these guys. In Malcolm Gordon's last fight against Bondar, I was watching that one last night, and it was really funny because Gordon's got Bondar's right arm in an arm bar, and he kind of goes for it, and then he kind of gives up on it. And then he switches off to the left arm of Bondar, right? And so Bisping says the right arm's in an arm bar. And then Brendan Fitzgerald goes, oh, he just switched that to the left arm. And Bisping interrupts him and goes, nah, Brendan, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. Yeah. That's where his arm broke. I mean, that wasn't an injury in a scramble. Gordon broke his arm with that arm bar. And then he wound up with Gordon on top of him, and all of his weight was on that arm. And that was when he had to tap. But Brendan Fitzgerald, the white belt, was absolutely right, and Bisping was absolutely wrong. And, so that was kind of funny. But other than that, like you said, I think Gordon's I think Makhachev is just so much better everywhere in the grappling that it's really hard to see Gordon pulling this one out of his hat.
Yep, I completely agree. All right, we'll move on to the next fight. We have Armen Petrosyan going against AJ Dobson. We have Petrosyan, who is 31 years old, 6'3" with a 71-inch reach. AJ Dobson, 30 years old, 6'1" with a 76-inch reach. Dobson 1 year younger. It's going to be Petrosyan with a 2-inch height advantage, and it's going to be Dobson with a pretty big 5-inch reach advantage. Petrosyan is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He made his debut against Gregory Rodriguez. What a tough debut there, right? And he was able to win a very close split decision. And then he went out there and lost the decision against Caio in his last time out, where Caio was able to take him down consistently for 15 minutes and kind of hold him on the mat for the majority of that fight. AJ Dobson, he has 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He had that submission win on the Contender Series where he hurt his opponent multiple times, eventually got the fight down to the mat, and sunk in the choke, no hooks in. And then after that, he did lose a decision to Jacob Malkoun last time out. No shame in that. But yeah, I think it's going to be a very fun fight. AJ Dobson is a guy that wants to get in and get out in the majority of his fights. Tons of first round finishes on his record. He hits very hard. He comes forward. He looks to take your head off. And it's an interesting fight because Armen Petrosyan has some of the worst takedown defense you'll ever see. I mean, 30% takedown defense. And it's not only in the UFC. You go back and watch every single one of this guy's fights, and he's getting taken down and controlled against the cage in literally every single fight. It's hard to find a fight where he's not getting taken down. And that's what opponents like to do. So I'm curious to see if AJ Dobson goes in here and tries to implement that game plan. But yeah, on the feet, I got to favor Petrosyan, has a high-level striking background. And when we do get to see him strike, when he's not getting taken down, when he's not getting held against the cage, the guy is having a ton of success. The guy is sharp on the feet. I went back and watched the fight with Gregory Rodriguez, and that fight is aging very, very, very well because on the feet, he outstruck Rodriguez and landed 127 significant strikes compared to Rodriguez's 61. So that win looks a lot better considering how good Rodriguez has looked. So he outlanded Rodriguez 41-18 in the first round, 35-24 in the second round, and 51-19 in the third round. So yeah, no doubt in my mind. I think, Dobson's going to be dangerous early, but no doubt in my mind, like in the second or third round, it's going to be Petrosyan all day. But Dobson's going to be live early to find that knockout. Petrosyan has been knocked out before, and he has been knocked out in the first round. And like I said, I'm curious to see if Dobson does try to take down Armen Petrosyan because everybody does, but I'm not sure if Dobson has the cardio to go out there and wrestle Petrosyan for 3 rounds because a lot of people don't have the cardio to wrestle Petrosyan for the full 3 rounds. We see a lot of times they do have success controlling Petrosyan, but once that second round starts, these guys don't have anything left. And once it is at range, Petrosyan makes them pay. So I do lean towards the Petrosyan side, but Dobson is a very dangerous striker early on. So Weezy, how do you feel about this one?
Such a great fight. This is just one of these beauties that's an undercard fight on a great card. But man, this is awesome matchmaking. Love seeing this for Dobson here because, if Dobson wants to keep this standing, Petrosyan's absolutely going to indulge him in that. But if he wants to try to mix in the wrestling and show, how complete of a mixed martial artist he is, the opportunity is definitely there for him. So when we look at the measurables, I'm giving an advantage to Dobson because he's 1 year younger and he's got a 5-inch reach advantage here. Armen is 2 inches taller on paper. Both guys are orthodox fighters. The experience advantage goes to Petrosyan. He's got 2 more professional fights, 30 more minutes in the pro cage, despite the fact that AJ has been a pro for over 2 more years, which also means that Petrosyan has been the more active fighter as a professional, averaging over 2 fights a year, while AJ Dobson's fighting about 1.1 times per year. Armen also has a slight UFC experience advantage with 1 more fight and 15 more minutes in the UFC cage. When it comes to the finish stats and the durability, I have it even. Both guys have similar finish rates as pros, 86% and 83%. But Dobson's more versatile as he's got 3 knockouts and 2 submissions, while all 6 of Armen's pro finishes are by knockout. Petrosyan's been finished in 1 of 2 pro losses, while Dobson's only pro loss was by decision to Jacob Malkoun, who couldn't finish a glass of water. So there's no proof that Dobson's like more durable than Petrosyan just because he's never been finished. The striking advantage that goes to Petrosyan. He's an excellent kickboxer, nice pedigree, really technically sound, great kicks, great punches, good straight down the middle punches, and he's got great power. A 2.89 significant strike differential at the UFC level, while Dobson is a 0.15, which is also good because it's positive. Dobson's power numbers are better than Armen's thus far in a small sample size. Petrosyan has the far better defensive numbers, absorbing only 2.26 significant strikes per minute in a comparison to 4.55 for Dobson. The defensive numbers are way better for Armen as well, 54% striking defense compared to 40% for Dobson. Neither guy has been knocked down yet. But what I think is most interesting here is if you look at Petrosyan, 5.17 significant strikes landed per minute. But then if you look down at the grappling stats, he's getting 3.87% control time, but he's being controlled 44.27% of the time. So he's losing about over 90% of the control time positions. And he's in those control time positions almost half of his 34 minutes in the cage, which means that he's landing 178 significant strikes, in really just about 18 minutes, if you think about it, right? Because you're really not landing significant strikes when you're being controlled, especially on the ground, by guys like Kolev and Borjayo, who were controlling him for long swaths on the ground and on the cage. He wasn't really landing anything. So if you take out all that time that he was controlled and that he did control his opponents, and then you look at his significant strikes through the lens of how much time is left, the guy's landing almost 10 significant strikes per minute. So definitely got some really good striking numbers here. We're going to see how well-rounded Dobson is, because if he keeps this fight standing and he doesn't land that big shot early, which is usually his path to victory, he's going to have to go to plan B and try to get this fight to the ground, where I think he should have a slight edge. He seems to be the more likely guy to go for takedowns in this spot. He showed great takedown defense in the first round against Malkoun, and he has a better takedown defense as a whole at the UFC level, 62.5% takedown defense for Dobson here, but it's only 30.77% for Petrosyan. Arman prefers to keep the fight standing, so I guess we're going to find out how well-rounded Dobson is, because there's definitely a weak spot in Arman's game when it comes to stopping takedowns and being controlled. As Arman and AJ are both giving up over 44% control time, and they're both giving up over 3.9 takedowns per 15 minutes to their opponents. Excuse me. That being said, I think AJ will be the more likely guy to offensively wrestle to win minutes here. And the strength of schedule, I'm giving to Petrosyan. He's fought, beaten, and lost to the better win-loss ratio and more experienced UFC and regional scene competition. Dobson's 1 year younger. He's got a 5-inch reach advantage. He's never been finished. He's got the better UFC power metrics, and he has a slight grappling advantage, while Petrosyan's 2 inches taller, and he has the overall and the UFC experience advantages, the striking and the strength of schedule advantages. I think this is a close fight. I think if AJ decides to mix in the grappling and has some success with that, I could see this fight playing out very close. But that's making a bit of an assumption, which is why AJ Dobson's probably sitting around plus 170 and Arman's probably sitting around minus 200 here. I got to lean Petrosyan.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big assumption. I went back and watched every single fight of Dobson, just didn't see any rest. I mean, he got a takedown on the Contender Series, but I think it was more so because he hurt his opponent like really bad on the feet, was able to get him down pretty easily. But yeah, if he wrestles, the path is absolutely there. Like Petrosyan has the worst takedown defense I've ever seen in my life, maybe outside of Malcolm Gordon with 0%. But yeah, Petrosyan's takedown defense is awful. A spot I was looking for was the under 2.5 at plus money. And I was waiting for it, and I was refreshing all day, and I go to do a main event video, and I record the video, and I get a call from my Uncle Weezy during the video. I couldn't answer it, but I call him back after, and he's like, dude, the lines are out. Where have you been? And I go and take a look, and man, I see the under 2.5 open up at plus 130. Yeah, just what I was waiting for all day. And it was there for 3 minutes, went to plus 105. That was there for 2 minutes, went to minus 130, went to minus 140, and then went to minus 180. So, yeah, I thought I was being kind of sneaky with, this under because, Dobson went the distance in his last fight. Petrosyan went the distance in his last 2 fights. But it looks like people are all over it. The odds makers opened it up at plus 130, but people have smashed it all to where it's unplayable, in my opinion. I think the under still hits, but I'm not laying minus 170. I wanted a better price. I wanted plus money, so no way I'm touching it at minus 170. But I think it's AJ Dobson in the first round, or I think it's Petrosyan in that second or that third. But as far as a bet, I just can't touch this fight, as of now. But I'm not touching the Petrosyan money line. I think he wins, but Dobson is extremely dangerous early. His striking's no joke, and Petrosyan has been knocked out before. So the pick's Petrosyan, but yep, no bet on this fight. I lean violence, but it got smashed in like the matter of like 10 minutes. The lines got smashed.
Yeah, and I mean, not only has Petrosyan been knocked out before, but he's been knocked out early in the first round before by a guy who probably isn't even as good as AJ Dobson. Hassan Yousefi is a regional scene journeyman with about 2 wins for every 1 loss. And if you look at, Petrosyan is definitely the best win on his resume by a mile. So AJ Dobson by first round KO or by first round submission, if you can get him up around plus 800, plus 1,000, something like that, that could be a real interesting way to put a very small amount of money on what is probably Dobson's best win condition. And we know that Petrosian's been knocked out in the first round before, and we know that Dobson carries huge power in his hands early in a fight. So that could be a good way to look at this one. But yeah, I'm still leaning Petrosian. I feel like, you know, his striking pedigree is just so much better that we have to count on Dobson to wrestle, and we just haven't seen enough of it from him in the past for us to say that that plus 170 is calling us enough for that we think he's going to actually wrestle. I don't think we have enough evidence of that.
Yep, right there with you. All right, let's move on to the next fight. We have Abubakar Nurmagomedov going against Gadzhi Omargadzhiev. We have Nurmagomedov, 32 years old, 5'11", with a 72-inch reach. Omargadzhiev, he is 29 years old, 6'1", with a 71-inch reach. Omargadzhiev, 2 years younger, is going to have a 2-inch height advantage, but it's going to be Nurmagomedov with a 1-inch reach advantage. Abubakar Nurmagomedov is 2-2 in 1 draw in his last 5 fights. He made his debut against, I believe, David Zawada, lost that fight by submission in the very first round, and then came back and won a decision against Jared Gooden in his last fight. That seemed like a long time ago as well, probably like either a year and a half, 2 years ago. It feels like a while ago. Gadzhi Omargadzhiev, he made his debut against Caio Bahayo, and Bahayo was able to win that decision with the knee towards the head towards the end, and but yeah, he got dominated in that fight against Caio, which, you know, no shame in it. Caio's a beast, but those odds were pretty close in that fight, if I can remember correctly. But yeah, it should be a fun fight here. We have 2 guys that are pretty solid wrestlers, pretty solid grapplers, but it's actually Omargadzhiev that was getting completely just out grappled in his last fight. He was controlled for 55% of the fight against Caio Bahayo. So should be a fun fight here. Weezy, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, this is the Syllable Bowl, and boy, you nailed both pronunciations. I mean, you know, you got like Abubakar Nurmagomedov is what? Abubakar. Yeah, that's a 9-syllable name. And then Gadzhi Omargadzhiev is a 7-syllable name. So this is a wild one. 2 very long-named Russians. Fun fight, man. Absolutely fun fight. Abu is a guy who's really known for shitting the bed when he's a big favorite. And Gadzhi's okay, man. I mean, he doesn't really have great wins on his resume. And, you know, he's coming down a weight class here to 170 when he's fought his whole career at 185. But we'll talk about that. The measurables advantage I'm giving to Gadzhi here is he's 3 years younger, 2 inches taller on paper, but this man lies about his height. And he is a switch stance fighter, while Abu has a 1-inch reach advantage here. The experience advantage goes to Abu. 6 more pro fights, 75 more minutes in the pro cage, and almost 2 more years as a pro fighter. Their UFC experience metrics are almost identical, but Gadzhi fighting about 1.5 times per year and Abu fighting almost twice a year. So neither one of these guys is very active. The finish stats and durability I'm giving to Omargadzhiev here, as he's got the better finish rate as a pro, 85% in comparison to 63% for Abu. And at the UFC level, he finished his only UFC win, and Abu's only UFC win was by decision. Abu's been finished in all 3 pro losses, while Gadzhi has never been finished in 14 professional fights. The striking advantage I'm giving to Abu, Gadzhi's like a bit of a wild man on the feet. He throws big overhand rights, tons of kicks, a bushel full of spinning shit, while Abu's more meat and potatoes on the feet and like the cleaner distance striker. He's got the better UFC metrics with a positive 1.07 significant strike differential, while for Gadzhi it's negative 0.6. And Abu has been more accurate, 49.6% to 41.5% for Gadzhi. And Gadzhi's spending less time at striking range. Abu has the way better striking defense, 69.4% in comparison to 39% for Gadzhi. The grappling advantage goes to Abu, as he's got the way better metrics. The average time, so he's got 1.68 takedowns per 15 minutes in comparison to 1.64 for Gadzhi. But if you look at the control time numbers, Abu, 34.39% control time, 0% control time allowed, while Gaji 19% control time for, but 56% control time allowed. So the strength of schedule advantage goes to Omar Gadzhiev because he's faced Bahayo, and he's way better than anybody that Abu has faced at the UFC level. But prior to the UFC, it's actually Abu who's fought the much better brand of competition as Gaji, fighting guys like, Vladimir Vasiliev, Alexei Novikov, Mateusz Kampi. These are not great fighters. They're kind of like Russian regional scene guys, while Abu was fighting in either PFL or like the other one. So he's definitely had some higher level competition on the regional scene. So Abu's got a 1-inch reach advantage. He's got the overall experience advantage, the striking and the grappling advantages, while Gaji's 3 years younger. He's a switch stance fighter, has the finish stats and the durability advantages, the superior UFC strength and schedule. It's a close fight. I mean, I have no faith at all in Abu, but he is Khabib's brother, and he's faced a way better strength to schedule. And Gaji is coming down to 170 for the first time in his pro career. He did fight there as an amateur, but the last time he fought at 170 was as an amateur in September of 2014. I would never lay juice on Abu, but I'm actually leaning his way to win this fight. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we might have to take a look at the weigh-ins then and see how Omar Gadzhiev looks. A spot that might stick out is the finish only for Omar Gadzhiev. Never been finished, whereas Abu Bakr Nurmagomedov has been finished in, I believe, every single loss, right? And Gadzi is the better finisher overall. Any thoughts on that? Maybe finish only, maybe it's plus money for the Gadzi side?
It's not a bad look, man. I mean, Gadzi, he's a wild man on the feet, so he could catch Abu with something there. And Abu, I mean, he got submitted by a triangle by David Zawada, who was 1-4 in the UFC. That one win coming over Abu Nurmagomedov, who was like a -300 favorite in that fight. Mm-hmm. I think Abu shit the bed Victor Hendry style against Pavel Kush in World Series, or not World Series of Fighting. Thanks, Keith Offenlock, for saying World Series of Fighting, because I always forget that one. I get it mixed up with PFL because it doesn't exist anymore. But yeah, World Series of Fighting. I mean, he's had some, the losses that he's had, he was a huge favorite. So the guy is, and is he Khabib's brother? Because I know those guys, they call everybody brother.
I don't know.
but like, they kept saying on the PFL tape that I was watching that, Khabib was his brother, his blood brother. And maybe somebody in the chat knows. And I mean, I was seeing Khabib in his corner quite a bit as well. So, but yeah, this is a hard one because you can't feel safe laying juice on Abu. But Gaji doesn't have great wins as a pro either. But he is coming down a weight class here, and he might be the bigger dude. And he's a good Sambo practitioner, So I think that these guys are going to have a lot of the same strengths.
So I looked up Khabib's brother. It's Muhammad Nurmagomedov.
Okay, so that is not like his cousin Abu Bakr. All right, so but they were saying that in PFL. Yeah. They were definitely saying that these guys were brother, but they always refer to each other as brother, or brother, So maybe they're just I was even asking myself, do these guys know what they're talking about? Because it doesn't seem like like Abdul Manap was Abu's dad, because like that's Khabib, who is the best of all time. Like Abu would be like the bum brother, like who's like the really good brother, and then there's the bad brother in any professional sport. Abu's the bad brother if he's Khabib's brother.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, he's a notorious bed shitter, right? So laying chalk on him is probably not the best idea in the world. And I think people might be a little bit down on Omar Gadzhiev after losing against Caio Bahayo. So we do see the line of Nurmagomedov. He opened up -180, currently -177. Gadzi opened up +155, currently +152. And like I said, I'm curious to see what that finish only, the scorecards, no action is on the Gadzi side, just because he's never been finished, whereas Nurmagomedov gets finished in all of his losses.
Yeah, and Local Man shakes fist saying Gadzi trying to milk a DQ last time shows me he's there to win and will be strategic when it counts. And dude, I couldn't agree more. That illegal knee, he's playing games. He's taking his hand up, he's putting it back down, and referees, they're not going to protect you when you're pulling that shit, And Gadzi was definitely trying to do that. And I think there was an eye poke earlier in the fight too that he was really trying to play up. I mean, I could tell, like he's kind of like the MMA version of Cowboy Bob Orton in professional wrestling. Is he's just always working the ref, always trying to get an advantage. And yeah, it seems like Godsey's a smart fighter who will take whatever path leads to victory. So, he's an interesting plus money number because we've seen Abu blow it as a favorite before. I think these guys have similar skill sets. If the weight cut works for Godsey and he looks good on Friday and he's still sitting around plus 150, it could be an interesting play, but I just don't think there's a whole ton of reasons to be like really high on Godsey either, but he's coming off a much tougher matchup than what Abu saw last time.
That is very well true. But yeah, I'm looking for this next matchup. We have the youngest fighter on the card, one of the youngest fighters in the UFC, in Yamato Nishikawa. Yamato is 19 years old, 5'7". So Makhmud Mustafayev, he's 34 years old, 5'8" with a 71-inch reach. So Yamato is going to be 15 years younger than Mustafayev, and it's going to be Mustafayev with a 1-inch height advantage. So Yamato, this guy, it's interesting. He has 30 professional fights at 19 years old, which means you go back and this guy was fighting at like 13 or 14 years old. Like it's nuts. And
as a pro,
I know, and I'm watching tape on this guy, and you got to remember, like, you're watching a 15, 16-year-old, 17-year-old, and he looks good. Like, he looks like he's a good fighter. He looks, semi well-rounded, solid striking, very good wrestling, some solid grappling as well. He looks solid at like 16, 17 years old, and now he's 19. I expect rapid improvements, but he's still 19. He still has not fought the best competition. It's going to be a step up, but he's going against Makhmud Mustafayev, who has to be like one of, if not the most inactive fighter I've ever seen in my life. Like, the guy has like 3 fights in the last 6 years. It's nuts. Like, his last, the Kevin Lee fight was like 2016, 2017, a long time ago. So it's a weird fight because we have Mustafayev as a massive favorite. And I think he should be favored, but do you really want to trust this guy at minus 550? A guy that barely fights, a guy we have not seen since like 2020 against Brad Riddell. A guy I don't know. This is probably the sketchiest fight on the card for me. This is probably the 1-800-GAMBLER fight of the card because, for one, we have Mustafayev, who just never fights. He's not active at all. And then 2, we have Yamato, who he's super young, like 19 years old, very unproven. And it's going to be a step up here. So, Weezy, I have no clue what to do with this fight. I think I'm going to be passing, but I can tell you one thing. I'm not laying minus 550 on Makhmud Mustafayev, although I think he probably wins and probably knocks this guy out. But sketchy fight here.
Yeah, it's a fascinating fight. It really is. Yamato, 15 years younger. Both guys orthodox fighters. Makhmud's 1 inch taller. I don't know who has the reach advantage because we don't have that number on Nishikawa yet. But yeah, the 19-year-old kid has a significant experience advantage over a 34-year-old man. It's crazy, dude. 19 years old, and he's got 13 more fights than Makhmud Mustafayev. He's got 75 more minutes in the pro cage. He's also been way more active. He averages over 4 fights a year in comparison to Makhmud, who fights less than 1.5 times per year. And he's only had 2 fights in the last 6 years, Makhmud Mustafayev. Nishikawa is 10-0 since Makhmud has had his last fight. Just that information alone makes the plus 400 on Nishikawa worth betting. You got a guy who's actually had fights since he's had something like fucking 30 fights since Makhmud's had his last 2, okay? Because this kid's pro career is only 6 years and 7 months. Makhmud Mustafayev has had 2 fights in the last 6 years and 7 months, and Nishikawa's had fucking 30. Nishikawa's had more fights than a lot of people have had hot meals in their entire life, okay? This kid is very, very, very active. And when you go back and you watch the tape on him, he's good, man. He's good. The durability advantage and the finish stats advantage I'm giving to Mustafayev here, as Magomed's got a 100% finish rate as a pro. For Yamato, it's 86%. So both guys are excellent finishers. But 16 of Magomed's 17 pro fights have finished inside the distance, while for Yamato, it's only 19 of 30. And that's because Yamato has 6 draws on his record, which I think every Japanese fighter, for some reason, has at least 6 draws on their record. I don't know why there are so many draws.
A lot of those. It's because a lot of those fights were only 2 rounds. So if like one guy wins the first, one guy wins the second, that's considered a draw. But yeah, I went through his record, and a lot of his fights were only 2 rounds.
Okay, that makes so much more sense. Yeah, because why so many draws otherwise? But anyway, yeah. So I'm giving Mustafayev that finish stats advantage, the striking advantage. Mustafayev, he swings for the fences, dude. He throws with everything with 100% power. He's landing a knockdown on 2.13% of the significant strikes that he's landing, and he's averaging 0.83 knockdowns per 15 minutes. His striking defense is only 41%, though, and he's absorbing 0.41 knockdowns per 15 minutes. Yamato is a good volume striker. He throws lots of lead leg kicks, and he has decent power. Magomed will be the way more dangerous dude on the feet here, though. And the grappling advantage, that's Mustafayev as well. He's getting his takedowns at a 50% clip. He's averaging 3.31 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he gets over 25% control time. His takedown defense, though, is only 23%, and he has been controlled over 37% of his 36 minutes in the UFC cage. Yamato's strength is his grappling. However, he's shown below average takedown defense and get-up game on the regional scene. So I feel that Magomed will be the more likely guy to win minutes in the grappling exchanges. If you go and you watch the Yuki Kawana fight, I believe it's that one, he gets a 5th round knockout, but he spends 4 of those 5 rounds being controlled on the ground, and he's actually landing strikes from the bottom that wind up accumulating. And the doctor looked to stop the fight at the beginning of the 4th round, and then he did stop it halfway through the 5th round because of the damage that Nishikawa was doing from the bottom. But Nishikawa seems to he's got to work on that takedown defense of his. So I feel like a guy like Mustafayev, who's getting his takedowns at a 50% clip at a high level here at the UFC level, fighting guys like Joe Proctor, Piotr Hallman, Fiziev, Lee, Brad Riddell, right? If he's getting his takedowns at a 50% clip, he should be the guy that's more likely to win the grappling exchanges here, because he'll be the more likely guy to get them just because of how aggressive he is. Strength of schedule, that's Mustafayev without a doubt. So Magomed has got a 1-inch height advantage, the UFC experience advantage, the finish stats advantage, the striking, grappling, and strength of schedule advantages. Plus, he's just got a terrifying haircut. I mean, he's just an absolutely terrifying dude to look at. Nishikawa, 15 years younger, though, and been the far busier fighter, and he has the overall experience advantage. I think Magomed wins this fight, but how do I lay minus 500 on a guy who hasn't fought in over 2.5 years? He's going against the way younger and busier fighter. I love violence here, but, we have to be honest with ourselves here. The reason Magomed Mustafayev, who's a professional fighter and does this for a living, the reason he hasn't fought in the last 2.5 years is, A, he doesn't seem to be able to get a visa to go anywhere but Abu Dhabi at this point, which is concerning, for reasons that I won't talk about here. But second of all, the fact that he's probably injured all the time, and he's 34. He's a 34-year-old bantamweight here. I'm sorry, lightweight, 34-year-old lightweight. So he's getting up there with just 2 fights in the last 6 years, while Yamato's had 30 in 6 years. So you just don't. I think there's going to be a lot of unknowns here. Is Magomed Mustafayev 100%? Is he even 60% at this point? I'm wondering.
Good God, look at that haircut.
I know.
Oh my God.
It's terrifying. Dude, it's terrifying. That guy looks like he should be the guy in Hostel who tortures the young people who are dumb enough, to go on vacation in Chechnya. Who picks Grozny as a vacation destination? I mean, you look at the hair on Nishikawa, He's a handsome young man. that haircut makes sense, you know? And he could have, you know, Asians have very straight hair. He could have a terrifying Magomed Mustafayev-esque haircut, but he chose a better path.
Absolutely. Yeah, terrifying haircut and just a terrifying line. I mean, yes, he should be favored. Yes, he should win. Yes, he should go out there and knock out Yamato. But minus 550 for a guy this inactive, I just can't do it. He actually opened up minus 800, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Opened up minus 800, currently minus 550. Yamato opened up plus 550, currently plus 400. And I'm with you. I'm liking violence here. You take a look at the finish rates. We see that Mustafayev has that 100% finish rate, 71% by knockout, 29% by submission. And then Yamato has an 86% finish rate. And then they have been finished in 4 of their 6 losses overall, with Mustafayev getting submitted twice and then Yamato getting knocked out twice. So I think the violence is the answer here for me, not touching the money line on Mustafayev. The over-under is not out yet on Bet Online, but they have the fight doesn't go to decision on 5 dimes. It was sitting at around like minus 210, something like that. Let me see if I can find the... There it is. So the fight doesn't go to decision. It's sitting at minus 190. Minus 190 there. And I think that's...
I love that line.
Yeah, I think that's a good look. I think it's a really good look.
Yeah, look, Mustafayev has been to the decision once in 17 fights. He is a terrifying human being in that cage, man. The guy gets submissions. He's torn dudes up with leg locks before, left them getting carried out of the cage. And he's got, dude, and just when he's on the feet, he's looking to kill you. He is not looking to win fucking points. That is for sure. So, yeah, this fight really leans violence here. Mustafayev is... I miss seeing Magomed in the cage, man. That dude is super fun to watch. Very exciting, very violent fighter. So I hope we get to see him more from now on. But I just don't think that he's going to go any place but to Abu Dhabi to fight, or perhaps if they do have events in Russia. But other than that, man, I don't think we're going to get to see this guy.
Yeah, let's see if he even shows up Saturday. Like, I'm not even convinced this fight happens until we see him show up. So we'll see. But yeah, if he does show up, I think it's going to be an exciting fight and one of the more intriguing fights on the card as well. But yeah, we do have about 200 just about in here. If you guys have not already, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Glad to be back on the main channel here at Pub Sports Radio. We'll move on to the next fight. We have Sabir Tukhugov going against Lucas Almeida. We have Tukhugov, 31 years old, 5'8" with a 67-inch reach. Almeida, 31 years old, 5'11" with a 71-inch reach. Same age there. We got Almeida with a 3-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage as well. Tukhugov, he is 2-2 and 1 draw in his last 5 fights. He did lose a decision to Renato Moicano, had a draw against Lerone Murphy, a knockout win against Kevin Aguilar, a decision loss to Hakeem Dawadu, and then a decision win against Ricardo Ramos. As far as Lucas Almeida, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He lost on the Contender Series against Daniel Zellhuber by decision, and then he went out there in his UFC debut and knocked out Mike Trizano in that 3rd round. Put up a very good performance there. But yeah, it should be a fun fight here, Weezy. You know, Lucas Almeida, a very fun and exciting fighter, whereas Sabir Tukhugov, kind of a guy that wants to, you know, mix in the takedowns, kind of slow down the fight, you know, more of a boring, grinding style. So kind of a clash of styles, if you will, here in this fight. But Weezy, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, we got Sabir Tukhugov, another guy who basically only fights in Abu Dhabi, who shows up once every 2 years when he feels like it, and then fights to a split decision almost every damn time. Lucas Almeida, same age as Zubaira here, 3 inches taller, 3-inch reach advantage, but it's Tukhugov who's a lot more experienced with 11 more pro fights, about 160 more minutes in the pro cage, and over 4 more years as a pro fighter, and a lot more UFC experience for Zubaira as well, with 6 more fights than Almeida and about 70 more minutes in the UFC cage. It's Almeida, obviously, who's the much better finisher here, as he's got a 100% finish rate in his 14 wins. And Zubaira, it's a 40% finish rate in his 20 wins. So 8 wins inside the distance for Zubaira as a pro, 7 by knockout, 1 by submission. And he has 2 of his 5 UFC wins are inside the distance by knockout. And Almeida's only UFC win is by knockout. Zubaira never been finished at the UFC level, but he has been finished twice as a pro in his 5 pro losses. Almeida has never been finished. In terms of these guys' strengths, we don't have much of a sample size for Almeida, but he's throwing more volume than his opponents. He's landing more strikes than his opponents, and his knockdowns per total significant strikes landed over 1%, just like Zubaira, but it's 1.16 knockdowns per 15 minutes for Lucas, while it's 0.46 for Tukhugov. So Lucas has got a ton of power, man. But it's Tukhugov who's the better minute winner on the feet because of that 65% striking defense in comparison to the 48% striking defense for Almeida. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this one shapes up because Lucas has been taken down. He's been controlled for 17.6% of his 26 minutes in the UFC cage. And we see Zubaira has 16 takedowns in 8 UFC fights, averaging almost 2.5 for 15 minutes and out-controlling his opponents 16.3% to less than 1%. And he's showing 100% takedown defense. So Lucas is going to want to keep this fight standing. He doesn't seem to be the guy that I expect to try to take down a guy with 100% takedown defense here. And Lucas, being a guy who's knocking a lot of people out, I think he's going to want to keep this one on the feet where he's probably the more powerful and dangerous striker. But is Zubaira, who obviously has the much better strength of schedule here, as he's been fighting just much higher level opponents for a longer period of time. It's just that we don't really see Zubaira anymore. He just doesn't fight much. But it's another situation where you have to lay juice on a guy that A, you don't see very often. That B, he fights in way too many close fights to be laying juice on this guy. Split decision against Dawodu. Split decision against Murphy. Split decision against Moicano. He beats Kevin Aguilar, who's a much lower level opponent than the rest of those guys. And he wins by unanimous decision over Ricardo Ramos in a fight that I think could have went literally either way. That one easily could have been a split decision, in my opinion, if I'm remembering it correctly. So, yeah, it's a close fight, but, it seems like Lucas has got the momentum. He's a little bit bigger. And it just seems like this dude is going to be the more powerful striker on the feet. Can he keep it standing is the question. But Zubaira, only 16% control time over 8 fights and 100 minutes in the cage tells you that he's not a guy that's going out there and just drowning people with his wrestling.
Yeah, I remember we cashed the Lucas Almeida finish only against Mike Trezano. It was a big, juicy number as well, which made no sense because we had Almeida with like a 100% finish rate and Trezano with like a 50% finish rate, right? This is another spot where I might take a look and go right back to that, Almeida, 100% finish rate, Tukhugov, a 40% finish rate? So, yeah, I like that finish only for Almeida, if anything. But outside of that, I think I might just pass on this one because I think Tukhugov should be favored. I think he should be able to go out there, mix in the takedowns, win minutes on the feet. But it's going to be Almeida, who is the more dangerous fighter. Obviously has a ton of power. Finishing Mike Trezano is no easy task, dropping him a couple times along the way. But yeah, we do see Tukhugov opened up as a dog and currently minus 158. And then we see Almeida open up as a minus 150 favorite, currently plus 138. So yeah, I think the finish only, the scorecards, no action Almeida is something I'll be looking at. If it's plus money, I'll probably be taking the shot there. I think he's the much more dangerous fighter, but Tukhugov by decision makes a lot of sense if you're leaning that way as well.
Yeah, agreed. I think we do have to keep in mind that, Tukhugov, I think, is a guy who spends more time in Abu Dhabi than he does Russia. He's one of these, Russians who's based there in Abu Dhabi. And Almeida's going to be making that trip. And we got to look through the lens of that, that these fights are taking place in Abu Dhabi. We've seen some fighters look really bad there, look like the worst versions of themselves there. So we have to keep in mind where fighters are coming from when they get there, and it's going to be interesting because Lucas is the one who's making the trip. Zubaira is already there. So, that's something to keep in mind for this one. But yeah, that finish only prop is something I'm going to be keeping my eye out for. And I'd like to make it 2 in a row on Lucas Almeida.
Let's do it, Lucas. Let's go. Let's get that finish. All right. We'll move on to the next fight. I'm actually really looking forward to this fight, Weezy. And I know me and you both have a bet on it. We have Volkan Oezdemir going against Nikita Krylov. We have Oezdemir, who is 33 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. Nikita Krylov, 30 years old, 6'3", with a 77-inch reach. Krylov, 3 years younger. Krylov with a 1-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage. Oezdemir 3-2 in his last 5 fights, a knockout win against Ilir Latifi, a decision win against Alexander Rakic, a knockout loss against Jerry Prochazka, a decision loss to Magomed Ankalaev, and a decision win against Paul Craig. Nikita Krylov 2-3 in his last 5 fights, a decision loss to Glover Teixeira, a decision win against Johnny Walker, a decision loss to Magomed Ankalaev, a submission loss to Paul Craig, and then a knockout win against Alexander Gustafsson. So this is a fight where I actually like the Krylov side a decent amount, I guess, just because I feel like he has more paths to victory. Krylov went out in his last fight against Gus, and he was, like you say, he was fighting like he was double parked, like he was fighting like a man possessed. Went out there, pressured forward, and tried to kill Gustafsson in the first couple minutes, and he was able to do just that. He knocked him down early, and then he eventually knocked him down and knocked him out a little bit later in that first round. Looked very good in that fight, and that's kind of, Krylov, he's so dangerous. The dude has like a 95% finish rate, 94% finish rate, and he can get it done, on the feet by knockout, and he can get it done by submission as well. And we do see that Volkan Oezdemir, he has been knocked out before, and he has been submitted before. So I just feel like Krylov has more paths to victory. I feel like on the feet, although I think that, Oezdemir should have success in terms of like the minute winning on the feet against Krylov, I feel like Krylov is very dangerous and potentially could knock out Oezdemir. And I feel like if Krylov is able to get this fight down to the mat, I feel like he's very, 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 very live for the submission as well, or the TKO. So I like Krylov here, but what I like even more is the violence. We have a killer be killed fighter in Nikita Krylov. Like, this guy is very rarely going the distance in both his wins or his losses. 16 UFC fights. I think he's been the distance like 3 or 4 out of those 16 times. So I like the violence here. I like the under 2.5. If I had to pick a winner, it's going to be Krylov to get, I'll say, a submission win at some point, getting the fight down to the mat, getting that sub. But I think both guys are also live for that knockout. So I just like violence here, not betting aside. Give me the under 2.5 in this one. Weezy, what are your thoughts on this fight here?
Yeah, I'm on that under 2.5 as well. And I mean, I like Krylov here. He's 3 years younger. He's got a 1-inch height advantage. He's got 2 inches of reach. He's also got 13 more professional fights. 5 more fights at the UFC level, and he's got comparable cage time in comparison to Oezdemir, just because Krylov in his pro career, the average fight time is 4.24 minutes. And even at the UFC level, where it's tougher to finish guys, 6.63 average fight time. I mean, that's fantastic if you're looking to bet unders. Nikita's finished 8 of his 9 wins at the UFC level, and he's been finished in 5 of his 7 losses, while Volkan's finishing 3 of his 6 UFC wins, and he's been finished in 3 of his 5 UFC losses. So both of these guys, UFC fights are finishing at well over a 50% clip. And for Krylov, it's more like an 80% clip, a little bit over 80%. Krylov has finished 27 of his 28 career wins inside the distance. So in terms of what these guys are doing on the feet, Krylov looking better in terms of the metrics, the significant strike differential, better than 2 for Nikita Krylov, while it's about 0.75 for Oezdemir. Krylov 10% more accurate, about twice as many knockdowns per 15 minutes, and about twice as good of a knockdowns for total significant strikes landed. But it's Oezdemir who's more defensively responsible, although he gets knocked down a little bit more per 15 minutes in comparison to Krylov. But both of these guys are extremely dangerous on the feet, a lot of power, and neither one of them are the most willing wrestlers here. As we see, Volkan's only gotten 3 takedowns in 11 fights, and for Nikita Krylov, it's only 10 takedowns in 16 fights. So we could probably expect this to stay on the feet, where both of these guys are landing about 4.5 significant strikes a minute, and both of these guys are landing, around 0.5 knockdowns per 15 minutes. So there's a pretty good chance that somebody's getting slept here. But there are also guys that, in Krylov's case especially, only 54% takedown defense. He's being controlled about 32% of that 106 minutes he's been in the UFC cage. So if Oezdemir does want to go to the wrestling, there's a possibility that he could win some minutes there. While Oezdemir has got the much better takedown defense, 86.67%, and he's been controlled less than 9% of his UFC career, despite the fact that he's had 45 takedowns shot against him in only 11 fights. So Volkan is very good at keeping it on the feet. And I think another good way to play this fight is, if you like violence, look at that fight ends by KO. Even though Krylov has as many wins by submission at the UFC level than he does knockouts, I just see this fight taking place on the feet a lot more than it does on the ground. When it comes to the strength of schedule, that's Oezdemir, the much better ratio overall and very similar in the total fights. And then in the wins as well, Oezdemir does have the better wins against the more experienced competition and better win-loss ratio. And the losses, the ratio is better for Oezdemir. More experienced competition is beating Krylov. So, yeah, I mean, it's a close fight, man. But I think just from what I've seen from Krylov lately, right, he's more experienced, he's younger, he's bigger, and he just goes for it. He just goes for it more. I kind of feel like Volkan's best days are behind him. If you can't finish Paul Craig, who's never fucking lost a decision in his life, you know, I mean, I don't know where you're at in your career.
Yeah, Volkan looked like a bum in his last fight, and I had a bet on Volkan, and I was like, dude, what are you doing? I also had a huge bet on the fight doesn't go, so I was pissed off. Like, how can you not finish Paul Craig? Like, he looked terrible in that fight. He looked sluggish, he looked slow, and Paul Craig was like having success in the striking at times in that fight. Like, if Paul Craig's having success in the striking, what is Krylov going to do to you? So yeah, I think it's Krylov here, but yeah, give me the violence. This is interesting. So the under 2.5 opened at -155, and then for some reason it went to -126. That's when you gave me that call. I called you back and you said go check it out. I went to check it out, was able to get in on that -126 there. Not sure why it went back up, but it did, thankfully. And then ultimately went back down to -130, and then is currently sitting at -145. I think the under is a very, very good look here. This is a Nikita Krylov fight, and Krylov fights finish more often than not. So yeah, give me the under. Krylov has a pick, but I do like the under more than anything.
Yeah, my prop template has that under at -126 where we got it as a trifecta bet because that's a 55.75% implied probability of the line, but fights are finishing under 2.5 in this weight class over 59% of the time. And then these guys are finishing at a rate at under 2.5 at about 67% of the time. So we're getting a break there, and they finish at a better rate than what the division does too. So yeah, 19 of these guys, 27 combined UFC fights have finished inside the distance. That's 70.37%. And we're only paying 55.75% for the implied probability. And I like that Krylov is a 92% finish rate in his wins and losses combined as a professional. So we got that killer be killed fighter. And we do have the line underpriced in comparison to the benchmark for the division when we've got a killer be killed fighter and two guys with a ton of power in their hands. So definitely love the under 2.5 here at -126. I bet it for 2.5 units.
Yep, I'm right there with you. I like it as well. All right, we'll move on to the next fight. We have Makhmud Muradov going against Caio Borralho. We have Muradov, who is 32 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. Caio, he's 29 years old, 5'10" with a 75-inch reach. It is Caio, who is 3 years younger. It's going to be Muradov with a 4-inch height advantage and same reach there. And I think Caio is lying about his height. Was it Caio that was lying about his height?
They're both liars, dude. Godzi lied.
Yeah.
Caio lied. Godzi said he's 6'1". Yes. Caio says he's 5'10", and Caio's literally 4 inches taller than Godzi. So they both had to lie. I think Godzi's 5'10", and I think Caio's probably 6'2".
Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense. Caio is not 5. So I think the height's going to be a lot closer than this does indicate. But yeah, Muradov is 4-0 in his last 5 fights. He is actually 4-1 in his last 5 fights because they did lose to Mearshart his last time out. Prior to that, knocked out Andrew Sanchez. Prior to that, knocked out Trevor Smith. Won a decision against Alessio Di Chirico. And then Caio Borralho was 5-0 in his last 5 fights. Had 2 wins on the Contender Series. I believe one was by decision, and then one was by knockout. And then he beat Omar Godzia by decision in his debut, and then he beat Armen Petrosyan by decision in his next fight. So The thing I like most about Caio is the fight IQ. I love this guy's fight IQ. He is super smart. He does what it takes to win. He's not afraid to go out there and make a fight boring. Went out there and controlled Omargadzhiev for the majority of the fight, and then went out there and did what everyone should do against Armen Petrosyan and control him and take him down for the entire fight. He did just that. He fights smart. He's position over submission. He's going out there. He's able to take guys down, control them. He's a BJJ black belt, and he's a really good striker as well. So on the feet, you got to favor Muradov here. Muradov's striking is no joke, but I feel like Caio can definitely dictate where this takes place, and it just wasn't the best. I know against Meerschaert, Meerschaert was able to take him down 3 times. Meerschaert was even able to start having success in the striking as the fight went on, which just wasn't a good look. And Muradov was a huge favorite in that fight, but Meerschaert was able to kind of take the damage early, kind of come back and kind of break Muradov. I just did not like how easy Meerschaert was able to get the fight down to the mat late first round and into the second. And I feel like Caio can do just that. I feel like Caio can push this guy against the cage, take him down, fight smart, and just do what it takes to win. So I like Caio here, and what I like I said, what I like most about Caio is I can trust him to go out there and win the fight and go in there with the right game plan. So I like Caio here. I know Muradov is no joke on the feet whatsoever, but I just feel like Caio is going to do what it takes to get this done. So I like Caio here. We'll talk about the money line in a little bit. It actually has came down quite a bit. Some money has been coming in on Muradov, so I'm curious to see where it goes throughout the week. But I do lean at Caio here to kind of grind out a decision, potentially a submission along the way. Muradov has been submitted a ton. It's like 4 or 5 times Muradov's been submitted. So maybe Caio, being a black belt, is able to sink that in. But, Caio's not going out of his way for a finish. I think I'm leaning more towards the decision route. But yeah, I like Caio here to win and win by grinding-based decision. Weezy, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Caio's 3 years younger. I think they're about the same height, because Caio lies about his height. And they got the same reach, and it's a southpaw versus orthodox matchup. So both of these guys' power weapons on the feet are going to be open for business. In particular, Muradov with that huge overhand right that he throws, and he throws heavy kicks. Muradov, much more experienced than Caio. 18 more professional fights, about 150 more minutes in the pro cage, and about 2.5 more years as a pro fighter. And he's also got the same amount of UFC level fights as Caio and a couple more minutes in the UFC cage. Both of these guys are good finishers, but it's Muradov with an 80% finish rate in 25 wins. So 20 of 25 wins inside the distance, 68% by knockout, 12% by sub. So 3 subs and 17 wins by knockout. And then he's also been finished in 71% of his 7 losses. So 4 submissions and 1 knockout, and he's been subbed in his only UFC loss. Well, Caio has got a 58% finish rate as a pro, and he's finished 1 of his 4 UFC wins, and he's never been finished before as a pro. The striking is all Muradov. The grappling is all Caio. It's a striker versus grappler matchup. Now, Muradov showing 80% takedown defense, and he's only yielded 3 takedowns in 4 fights, and he's only been controlled 4.29% of his UFC career. So this is a guy who, before the Meerschaert fight, had 100% takedown defense. So a lot of people didn't see Meerschaert having success in that fight because Muradov is such a talented striker, because his footwork was so good, because Muradov's been fighting only in that big cage where he's allowed to kind of move around and not get the cage cut off on him. And because he's such an aggressive striker, it's hard to just march this dude down because you might walk onto something. So it's a very interesting fight because obviously Caio has had a ton of success. 8 of his 10 takedown attempts, he's gotten them. He's averaging 2.63 per 15 minutes, and he's controlling his opponents 50% of his UFC cage time. But Muradov has been at striking range for 93% of his 49 minutes in the cage. So both of these guys have been really good at keeping the fight where they want it. In Caio's case, it's on the ground, and in Makhmud's case, it's on the feet. And then if we look at the strength of schedule, Muradov is fighting the much more experienced competition here. So you definitely like that. Gerald Meerschaert, Andrew Sanchez, Trevor Hot Sauce Smith, D. Chirico. in comparison to guys like Aaron Jeffrey and Jesse Murray, even Omar Gadzhiev. None of those guys have a UFC win. Omar Gadzhiev has a Dana White Contender Series win, but Murray 0-2 or 0-3 at the UFC level. Or I'm sorry, 0-3, 0-2 or 0-3 is Aaron Jeffrey, and Jesse Murray's 0-1. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting fight. I saw Muradov earlier last week at plus 230, and I didn't pull the trigger, but I knew I should have. And now, you know, the best that you can get him is like plus 170 or plus 175. And that makes a lot more sense because we can't just assume that, you know, Muradov hasn't worked on that takedown defense. He's the much more experienced guy. He's much more dangerous on the feet. And he was showing 100% takedown defense at the UFC level against guys that can wrestle in D. Chirico, Trevor Smith, and Andrew Sanchez, all really good wrestlers. So maybe that Meerschaert fight is just a little bit of a bump in the road, and Muradov can get back to his winning ways here. But Caio is very smart, and you got to believe that if Caio doesn't feel comfortable on the feet, that he's not going to let it stay there for long.
Yeah, the line has moved a lot. So, yeah, it was plus 230 for a while, went all the way down to plus 170 is a bet online for Muradov. And then Caio opened up minus 200, and he's currently went all the way down to like minus 270, and he's currently back up to minus 200 there. Yeah, the over-under set at 1.5 rounds, the over 1.5 minus 175, the under 1.5 is plus 145. And I'm very tempted on the over. The only thing that's kind of holding me back is Caio being that black belt and Muradov getting submitted a million times. But I think this goes over, and the over 1.5 at minus 175 is something I'm close to pulling the trigger on, but I don't know if I'll touch it. Any thoughts on the over under there?
Yeah, I saw it at minus 175, and that caught my eye as well because at minus 175, that's a 63.64% implied probability, and that's priced right on with what the benchmark is for the division. But these guys are going over 1.5s in 75% of their 8 combined UFC fights. So 6 of these guys' 8 combined UFC fights have went over 1.5, 75% of them. And we're only paying 63.64% on the implied probability of the line. So it's not overpriced at minus 175. But, you know, also I believe that Muradov can get a knockout, and Bohaio can get a ground and pound knockout or a submission. So, you know, it's definitely live to finish under 1.5, but that's not an overpriced minus 175 for the over there.
Yeah, I think I'll probably just be staying away from this fight. It's a good fight. It's a fight that I'm just fine with sitting back and watching. Pretty high level fight with two guys that I really like. I like both these guys a lot. So I think I'm just going to sit back, pass on it from a betting perspective, but it should be a fun one to watch. All right, and I think we start the main card next. Am I correct?
If there's 6 fights on the main card, then yes.
All right, so we're going to take a 60-second commercial break, guys. We'll be back very, very shortly. See you soon. And we are back, Stat Diggers, Pub Sports Radio, and I said this was the first fight on the main card. It's actually not. It's a prelim, which just goes to show you how absolutely stacked this card is. This is a fight that I feel like could be a main event on a fight night card. I mean, I'd rather see this main event than the Araujo Grasso fight. So just a phenomenal fight here. I feel like this is probably going to be the most highly debated fight of the card. I see a lot of people on the Brady side very passionate about it, and I bet we're going to see a lot of people on the Muhammad side very passionate about it. One of those fights where I think we're going to get a lot of people on either side here, and those fights are always fun to break down. So we'll start with Belal Muhammad. He's 34 years old, 5'11", with a 72-inch reach. Sean Brady, 29 years old, 5'10", with a 72-inch reach. Sean Brady, 5 years younger. Belal Muhammad with a 1-inch height advantage, same reach there between the two. Belal Muhammad is 4-0 and 1 no contest in his last 5 fights. A decision win against Diego Lima, no contest against Leon Edwards, decision win against Damian Maia, decision win against Stephen Thompson, and a decision win against Vicente Luque. Sean Brady, 5-0 in his last 5 fights, a decision win against Court McGee, a decision win against Ismail Nardiev, a submission win against Christian Aguilera, submission win against Jake Matthews, and a decision win against Michael Chiesa. And yeah, I think this is a very close fight. I think for me, at least, this is the closest fight and the toughest fight on the card to call. We have that hype tax on Sean Brady. The guy has a lot of hype on him, has those nice tattoos, that nice back tattoo, 15-0, undefeated, never lost. And Belal Muhammad, a guy that, I don't know, he's kind of a, people call him a boring fighter, and he's boring, this and that. People don't really seem to like him. But everybody loves Sean Brady. So I think, this is a fight that I feel like should be closer to a pick 'em, because both these guys are so similar. Both these guys are very well-rounded. Both guys can strike, can wrestle, can grapple. But I feel like the big difference is the cardio in Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad is going to have the clear cardio advantage. Sean Brady does slow down as the fight goes on. We did see him slow down bad against Michael Chiesa in his last fight, slowed down a little bit against Court McGee as well. Court McGee was out striking Sean Brady in terms of the numbers in that second and third round. I like the output of Belal Muhammad better as well. Belal Muhammad throws more, he lands more as well. And yeah, like I said, that cardio most importantly. But, Sean Brady's a beast. I did not expect him to go out there and be able to take down Michael Chiesa that many times, be able to control him. But it was very concerning seeing Sean Brady get outstruck on the feet by Michael Chiesa. Like, Chiesa was having a ton of success, and Chiesa is not really known for that striking. So it's an interesting fight, and it's a very, very tough fight to call, because is Sean Brady going to be able to take down Belal Muhammad, who has some of the best, if not the best, takedown defense in the division at 91.67%? Like, is Sean Brady going to be able to take him down? On the flip side, is Belal Muhammad going to be able to take down Sean Brady, who has very good takedown defense in his own right? If their wrestling cancels each other out, if this fight stays standing for 15 minutes, who has the advantage? I would lean towards Belal Muhammad due to the output, due to the cardio, the pace, the pressure. But yeah, Sean Brady, if he gets the takedowns, he's the more dangerous grappler. So, Weezy, I think this is probably one of the most, if not the most intriguing fight on the card, probably one of the most toughest fights to call. And I'm curious to hear you talk about this one.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, Brady, I got with the measurables advantage because he's 5 years younger, but they're the same height. They're the same reach. They're both orthodox fighters. They're both coming out of fantastic camps. But Belal's more experienced. He's got 10 more pro fights. He's got twice as much time in the pro cage, almost 170 more minutes in the cage than Sean Brady. And he's got 2 more years as a pro, so he's fighting 2.5 times per year, while Brady, it's a little bit less than twice a year. And he's also got 11 more fights at the UFC level and about 160 more minutes in the UFC cage. So Belal's a lot more experienced, and he's an inch taller. Now, Brady's the better finisher here, as Belal has only got a 16% finish rate at the UFC level and a 24% finish rate as a pro, while Brady's got a 47% finish rate as a pro, and he's finished 2 of his 5 UFC wins. Belal Muhammad has only been finished once in 25 pro fights, and that was a knockout loss to Vicente Luque early in his UFC career. When it comes to the striking, I'm giving Belal the advantage here. He's got the better metrics, the better significant strike differential. He throws more volume than his opponents. They're both really good defensively. Belal has been knocked down 6 times in 16 fights, while Brady has never been knocked down. But like, if you just watch these guys distance striking, it should be Belal who's the minute winner on the feet. I think a lot of these Sean Brady striking statistics are clinch striking and ground striking, because he's spending almost half of his time in those positions, while it's about a third for Belal Muhammad. And Brady gets out volume too. So, I didn't like the fact that Court McGee was winning minutes on the feet against Sean Brady, because Belal Muhammad is just a way better fight IQ version of Court McGee. Court McGee's got that fantastic conditioning. He's a fantastic grappler. But the problem with Court is that he doesn't use the grappling when he needs to. Like Court McGee tried no takedown attempts against Carlos Condit, one of the worst guys in the division when it comes to takedown defense. You don't have to worry about Belal making that mistake. So Belal's the kind of guy who fights where his opponent is least comfortable. So do I think that Belal Muhammad has a chance if he feels like he's the better striker here? And we just saw him winning minutes on the feet against Vicente Luque in his last fight. So if you're winning minutes on the feet against Luque, you're going to win minutes on the feet against Sean Brady, because those guys are not comparable with their striking acumen. But Belal Muhammad has only been taken down 3 times in his UFC career. His opponents have attempted 36 takedowns in 16 fights, but he's only been taken down 3 times, and he's giving up less than 5% control time. Now, Brady gets 41% control time in his wins, in his fights. Well, his wins, because they're all wins. Belal gets about 25%. But both of these guys are getting over 2 takedowns per 15 minutes. Brady a little more active with his submission attempts. But if Brady doesn't get this fight to the ground, he's not going to look minus 150. I can tell you that. It's going to be a pretty easy win for Belal Muhammad. And there might even be a chance that Belal is able to take down Sean because he's gotten 34 takedowns in 16 fights. Brady, the more active wrestler. Brady, the more better control time fighter. But when you look at the strength of schedule here, the overall competition is better for Muhammad, and he's fighting more experienced competition. And the wins are better for Muhammad, not only in the ratio, but in the total fights as well. So I just think that Belal has fought the better brand of competition, and he's the better minute winner in this spot. Brady's going to have to get takedowns. But if you're laying juice, you're making the assumption that he gets this fight to the ground and wins a good amount of minutes there in at least 2 out of 3 rounds, because if he doesn't, you probably shouldn't be laying minus 150 on him.
Yep, I will be betting Belal. It's just a matter of when. Sean Brady, wow. Sean Brady opened up plus 190 as a dog, which is interesting. And he's currently minus 145. Belal Muhammad opened up as a minus 225 favorite, and he's currently plus 125. So the odds makers opened up Belal as a pretty big favorite. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I will say I think this is a very close fight. I think it should be a pick 'em. And I think there's a lot of reasons to like Belal here. So I will be betting Belal as a dog. I just don't know if I should do it now or if more money will come in on the popular Brady. It's kind of tough to call because Belal was sitting at plus 134 this morning, and I kind of just kept waiting, and now it's plus 125. So I'm curious to see where it goes, but I think Belal money line will be on my betting card this week. I don't want to get fancy with the props. Like Belal by decision is probably a good look, but it probably won't get much better of a price, and I can actually look at it right now. So on 5 dimes, they have Belal Muhammad to win by decision sitting at plus 200. Brady by decision is plus 170. I think the fight goes to decision is a great look. Minus 210, minus 240, probably parlayable. I don't really see either guy getting finished here, but what I like most is that Belal money line.
Yeah, maybe a finish only prop for Brady. That could be a good look too.
Yeah.
But he's the favorite, so you're probably gonna have to pay up for that. But it might not be worse than minus 200. So that could be a good way to look at it too if you're on that Brady side, but you don't want to take the chance that Muhammad pulls a Belal Muhammad and out minutes him, like just wins 12 of the 15 minutes and gets a decision. So this is such a high level fight. I can't believe it's not on the main card, but I'm going with Belal Muhammad here. I'm a big fan of his. I love the fight IQ. I love the conditioning, and I love the fact that he fights his fights where his opponent is least comfortable.
All right, I like it. Looks like we're both on the same page there. All right, we'll move on to the main card, and we have Manon Fiorot going against Katlyn Chookagian. We have Chookagian, who is 33 years old, 5'9", with a 68-inch reach. Fiorot, 32 years old, 5'7", with a 65-inch reach. It's going to be Fiorot 1 year younger. It's going to be Chookagian with a 2-inch height advantage and a 3-inch reach advantage. Chookagian, she is 4-1 in her last 5 fights, a knockout loss to Jessica Andrade. Since then, she has put together a 4-fight win streak, a decision win against Cynthia Calvillo, a decision win against Viviane Araújo, a decision win against Jennifer Maia, and a decision win against Amanda Ribas. Manon Fiorot 5-0 in her last 5 fights, made her debut against Victoria Leonardo, won that fight by knockout, knocked out Tabitha Ricci, won a decision against Mara Bueno Silva, and then won a decision against Jennifer Maia. And yeah, this is a fight where it's going to be a nice test for Manon Fiorot against a very tough fighter to deal with in Katlyn Chookagian. And Manon Fiorot kind of reminds me a little bit of Chookagian. I think Fiorot, she has that same volume as Chookagian, maybe even better volume even, but I think she hits a lot harder than Chookagian as well. I think she has much better accuracy than Katlyn Chookagian, who hits air the majority of the time with that 35% striking accuracy. So I also think that Manon Fiorot has a very sneaky path to victory here with the wrestling. So one thing I noticed going back and watching tape on Fiorot is she's started to implement some wrestling into her game. She went and took down Mara Bueno Silva twice, which, if you guys know Mara Bueno Silva, she's literally good at one thing and one thing only, and that is the arm bar from guard. But Fiorot went and took her down multiple times, able to control her, stay safe on top, look good doing it. And then she went and took down, Jennifer Maia, a black belt, multiple times as well, and had success taking her down and controlling her. And my thinking is, like, why can't Manon Fiorot go out there and take down Katlyn Chookagian, who has like a 54% takedown defense? So on the feet, I think it'll be competitive in terms of, the volume being landed, but Fiorot landing the harder shots and a little more volume even, and actually landing shots, whereas Katlyn Chookagian, she'll be landing volume, but she'll be punching air. She'll be making those sounds, swaying the judges. And then I also think Manon Fiorot has a legitimate path in mixing in the takedowns here and winning minutes on the mat. We have seen Chookagian struggle there before with that 54% takedown defense. So, yeah, I like Fiorot, and just like last week, I was very confident in Pierre Rodriguez. I ended up passing because a lot of times I'm super confident and the fights don't really play out how I expected, and it really didn't. I thought, Sam Hughes performed really well in that fight, played out a lot closer than I thought, and I thought maybe the value probably was on Sam Hughes in that close fight. And I feel like the same thing probably happens here. I feel like Manon Fiorot is going to win this fight, but is she really going to look like minus 220, minus 230? I mean, potentially with the right game plan, but Katlyn Chookagian is very good at making fights super close, and it probably goes to decision. We got to count on the judges to get it right. So it's one that I'm probably going to stay away from, but I am very confident in Manon Fiorot. But chalk, women's MMA, minus 220. I think I'm going to pass here. Weezy, I'm curious to your thoughts on this one because I know you're a pretty big Fiorot fan.
Yeah, I am. But there's reasons to like Katlyn here. She's a couple inches taller. She's got a 3-inch reach advantage. She's got 12 more professional fights. She's got about 150 more minutes in the pro cage. Actually, about 170 more minutes. She's got 11 more UFC level fights. She's got about 160 more minutes in the UFC cage. Fiorot, the much better finisher. Katlyn Chookagian couldn't finish a glass of water. And she's also been more durable, as Chookagian's been finished twice, and Fiorot has never been finished. And Fiorot is just like a better version on the feet of what Chookagian does, because Chookagian lands more strikes than she absorbs. She throws more than she absorbs. She's really good defensively at 63%. And, she's a good minute winner on the feet. But look at those numbers for Manon. She's got a positive 4.08 significant strike differential. That means every minute she's landing 4 more significant strikes than her opponents. She's 10% more accurate than Katlyn Chookagian. She's over 7% more defensively responsible. She absorbs like almost 2 less significant strikes per minute than Katlyn does. And she lands more than 2 more significant strikes per minute than Katlyn does. So whatever Katlyn does well on the feet, which is win minutes from distance and win decisions, Manon's just the better version of that. And then you look at the takedowns, Manon's getting her takedowns at a 50% clip. For Chookagian's a 15% clip. Only 4 takedowns in 15 fights for Katlyn, while Manon actually has 6 takedowns in 4 fights. Manon is out controlling her opponents at better than a 6-to-1 ratio, 18.6% to 2.9%, while Chookagian's getting out controlled by her opponents at better than a 2-to-1 ratio. Katlyn's got 4 takedowns and has given up 21. And Manon has 6 takedowns and was only given up 1. So Manon's not only the more likely lady to win minutes, in the striking exchanges, in my opinion, because I think she's a better distance manager than Katlyn Chookagian, and she uses her kicks a lot better than Katlyn does. So that is what allows her to be able to hit her opponents when her opponents can't hit her. And then I also think Manon's more likely to win minutes in the grappling exchanges, as she's the more willing wrestler. And I think that she's really good at avoiding submissions on the ground, in addition to getting takedowns when she goes for them. And then when we look at the strength of schedule, Chookagian's better on the strength of schedule, but the ratios are actually similar. It's just Katlyn's fighting much more experienced competition. So, yeah, I like Katlyn's strength of schedule. I like Katlyn's experience. I like Katlyn's height and length. But for Manon, I think she's the much better striker. I think she's the better minute winner in the grappling exchanges here. I think she's more powerful and more dangerous, much more likely to win the fight inside the distance. I think a finish-only prop on Fiorot would be a great look here. Yeah, I'm picking Manon here, but look, this is a striker versus striker matchup, and one of these two ladies is bigger, longer, more experienced, and has fought the better brand of competition. So tread lightly.
Yeah, if it plays on the feet for 15 minutes, Fiorot probably does not look minus 220. My thinking is hopefully she does mix in those. I mean, if she's mixing in takedowns against Jennifer Maia and Mara Bueno Silva, she's got to against Chookagian. So we'll see. But yeah, this line's weird. I thought it would come down a little bit more, but it actually just, the Fiorot line has been like pounded over like the past 24 hours. So she was like minus 176 a couple days ago. She's now minus 220. So I kind of expected money to come in on Chookagian. We'll have to see throughout the week, but yeah, I'm not betting Fiorot at minus 220. Every Chookagian fight is close for the most part, unless she's getting starched by like Jessica Andrade. This is interesting. The over 2.5 is minus 340. Goodness, you were laying a chalky pro. I think it goes over, but I would not be laying minus 340 on just due to how dangerous Fiorot is. And like you said, the finish only, although it should be priced like minus 1,000, I bet they won't price it minus 1,000. That's going to be something to look at. But yeah, I don't see myself with the bet on this fight unless the Fiorot price tag comes down a decent bit. But yeah, I like Fiorot here, and I'm very confident. But I do expect this to probably play out closer than I probably expect.
Yeah, I think the line is a little bit wide here. I think that these ladies have very similar skill sets in a lot of places. And Chookagian's dangerous on the ground, too. I mean, I think she's a brown belt under John Danaher, so she's no joke on the ground. But, I just think that Manon's a lot tougher, a lot scrappier, a lot meaner. And I think she's just got a ton more power. So I think those are big difference makers. And I'm a big fan of Manon. First time I saw her fight, she came out in an Allen Iverson jersey, and the walkout music was Biggie. And I was like, this woman is going to stomp this poor hoe that she's going into the cage with. And that's exactly what happened. So, yeah, Warman and Fiorot, I'd like to see her take the next step and win this fight.
Heck yeah, I can't wait for that. And I can't wait for this next fight as well. We have Beneil Dariush going against Mateusz Gamrot. We have Dariush, who is 33 years old, 5'10" with a 72-inch reach. Gamrot, 31 years old, 5'10" with a 70-inch reach. Gamrot, 2 years younger, same height. Dariush with a 2-inch reach advantage. Dariush, 5-0 in his last 5 fights. A submission win against Frank Camacho. A knockout win against Drakkar Klose. A knockout win against Scott Holtzman. Decision win against Diego Ferreira, and a decision win against Tony Ferguson. A little bit of a layoff here for Dariush. He is coming off of a injury, but will be back here this Saturday. Looking forward to it. Gamrot, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. A decision loss to Guram Kudus in his debut. Arguable, I personally did score it for Gamrot. It was a close fight, though. Scott Holtzman knockout after that, submitted Jeremy Stevens, knocked out Diego Ferreira, and then got a decision win against Arman Tsarukyan in a main event back in June. So yeah, should be a very good fight here, Weezy. Both guys so well-rounded. Both guys very, very good strikers, very good grapplers as well. I think these two match up very well with each other. I think it's going to be a good fight, and it's a very good of a step up for Gamrot in terms of the rankings here. Beneil Dariush, I think last time I checked, he was ranked like 5 or 6, something like that. But close to that top 5. So looking forward to see if Gamrot can take that step up and see if he passes this test. So Weezy, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, great fight. Such a high-level fight again here. Chookagian Fiorot, super high level. Muhammad against Brady, super high level. And then we get Dariush Gamrot, right? And there's not a lot of differences here, right? Same height. Dariush a little bit older, a year and a half. Dariush got a 2-inch reach advantage. Southpaw versus Southpaw matchup. Gamrot over at ATT. Dariush can't train with killers over at King's MMA. Dariush 3 more pro fights, but Gamrot a little more experience actually in the cage. Dariush has been a pro for 2 years longer, but Dariush with a big UFC experience advantage with 15 more UFC level fights and about 130 more minutes in the UFC cage. Both of these guys are good finishers. Dariush finishing at a 53% clip at the UFC level, 75% clip for Gamrot. And Dariush, surprisingly, has been finished in all 4 of his losses. And Mateusz Gamrot, as far as I'm concerned, that dude's never lost. He's 22-0, and he's never been finished. So, Gamrot probably more durable than Beneil Dariush, but both of these guys are pretty damn good finishers. In terms of the striking, they're both landing more than their opponents do, but Dariush throws more volume and is about the same amount of accuracy as Gamrot, but showing more power and more knockdowns per 15 minutes. And he's also been knocked down less per 15 minutes in comparison to Gamrot. But Gamrot with a 63% striking defense, 59% for Dariush. And when it comes to the grappling, you see a guy like Dariush with 43% control time for and 8% control time against. Both of these guys' takedown defense is above 80%. Both of these guys are getting their takedowns at about a 35% clip. And both of these guys control their opponents at like a 6-1, 7-1 ratio. So they're both really good at the same things here. And Dariush has got the better brand of competition that he's beaten and fought. And he's not that much older than Mateusz. And, he's a lot more experience at the UFC level. I'm not exactly sure why Gamrot's such a big favorite here. He's not that much younger than him. He hasn't fought the better brand of competition in comparison to Dariush here. And Dariush is on a 5-fight win streak at least. He's looking very good. Beneil's got a ton of power on the feet. He's a fantastic grappler. Great submissions, great power. And he's very aggressive. This is a close fight, man. But Gamrot, the bookies are giving Gamrot a lot of love right now.
Yeah, it actually opened up as a -155 favorite, but he has been bet all the way to a -190. I see -200 there on FanDuel Sportsbook. And Beneil Dariush is a +165 favorite. Like we mentioned, they do a lot of things very similar. Like this is such a well-matched fight. That it probably should be closer, but there's a lot of hype on Mateusz Gamrot, a lot of hype on this guy, and rightfully so. He's a phenomenal fighter, but this will be a decent step up in competition. Sarukian was a phenomenal win, but that was a close fight. Ferreira was a phenomenal win. Jeremy Stevens, Scott Holtzman, and then I thought he won that Kutalante fight as well. But yeah, it should be a good fight here. One thing we were kind of talking about before the show was a potential under or fight doesn't go to decision, because the under 2.5 right now opened up at +105. It's now +160. Both these guys have power. Both these guys have submission skills. I think the under or the fight doesn't go is very sneaky, right? You talk about Dariush getting finished in every single one of his losses, right? So yeah, I don't hate that, especially at that plus money, +165, +160 for that under. I think that's something that is kind of jumping out to me.
Yeah, so check it out. I mean, these guys have 25 combined UFC fights, and 15 of them have finished inside the distance. That's 60%. And for the under 2.5, we're getting a 38.5% implied probability at +160. So that is actually so the under 2.5 at 155 pounds in 3-round fights happens 46.6% of the time. Here we're only paying 38.46% of the time. So that's 8% break over what the bookies are giving us. And then when we compare how often Gamrot and Dariush are under 2.5 at the UFC level, it's 6 out of 10 fights. 60% of the time of these guys' 25 fights, so 15 of 25 fights have went under 2.5. We're only paying 38.46% on the line. That's a 21.5% break. So my prop template has this under 2.5 as a massive advantage over the books and a completely underpriced under 2.5. So at plus 160, I'm going to take a crack on this for 1 unit.
Yeah, and 5 Dimes has the fight doesn't go there at plus 120 there. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty sneaky look there at plus 160 for that under. Alrighty, let us move on to the next fight. We have Petr Yan going against Sean O'Malley. We have Petr Yan, 29 years old, 5'7" with a 67-inch reach. Sean O'Malley, 27 years old, 5'11" with a 72-inch reach. Sean O'Malley, 2 years younger. Sean O'Malley with a 4-inch height advantage, and Sean O'Malley with a 5-inch reach advantage. So Petr Yan is 3-2 in his last 5 fights: a knockout win against Uriah Faber, a knockout win against Jose Aldo, DQ against Aljamain Sterling in a fight he was winning, a decision win against Corey Sandhagen, and a decision loss against Aljamain Sterling. He lost as a pretty big favorite there. Sean O'Malley, 3-1 and 1 no contest in his last 5 fights, a knockout loss to Marlon Vera, a knockout win against Thomas Almeida, Chris Moutinho, Julian Paiva, and then that no contest against Pedro Munoz. So, like last week, I was thinking, you know, this line is very wide. I might be taking a look at Sean O'Malley at like crazy odds. But, you know, this kind of surprises me that the line closed up big time. Like Sean O'Malley was a plus 300 or so favorite. At one point, Sean O'Malley was like plus like 360 something at one point, 350, and now he's all the way down to plus 235. I did not expect this line to close up that much. Petr Yan's only minus 275 right now on Bet Online. And yeah, I think Petr Yan absolutely should win this fight. I didn't think Petr Yan should have been like minus 500 like he was, but you know, I think the line's coming down, and yeah, I like Petr Yan here to get it done. But yeah, on the feet, you know, Sean O'Malley could definitely have success, but I think Petr Yan with that pressure, with that pace, and especially with the takedowns. I mean, he has a clear path to victory. Take this fight down to the mat. Sean O'Malley, 64% takedown defense, and it's kind of weird. Like nobody's really been testing that takedown defense. I think the UFC has been doing Sean O'Malley a ton of favors, right? Like Pedro Munoz doesn't go for takedowns. Julian Paiva, black belt, but doesn't go for takedowns. Chris Moutinho doesn't go for takedowns. Terrible haircut. Thomas Almeida doesn't go for takedowns. Petr Yan, you know, you'd think he goes for takedowns here, and if he does, he's going to have a ton of success. So I like Petr Yan here. I don't have a bet on this fight, but if like money keeps pouring in on Sean O'Malley and Petr Yan goes like minus 200 for some reason, I'll probably bet Yan at that point. Like this line has closed big time. Like Petr Yan was minus 400 just a couple weeks ago. He's now minus 275. So interesting line movement on this one. Weezy, what are your thoughts on this fight? It should be a very good one. We have the hype train and Sean O'Malley going against one of the best fighters in the division in Petr Yan.
Yeah, such a great fight. Can't wait for this one. And, you know, I mean, I think that there are some things to like about O'Malley here. He's still only 27 years old. He's getting better, and he's on paper 4 inches taller. I don't know if that's true or not, but we do know he's got a 5-inch reach advantage here. So you like that. You know, I mean, we know that O'Malley's keeping his fights at striking range for a massive percentage of his cage time. So, you know, we like the fact that he's got a good striking numbers here. But Yan, even though he only has 2 more professional fights, he's got 150 more minutes in the pro cage in comparison to O'Malley. And even though both of these guys have 10 UFC level fights, it's Yan who's got twice as much time in the UFC cage with over 80 more minutes in comparison to Sean O'Malley. Now, O'Malley's finished 75% of his UFC wins. Yan has finished 50% of his UFC wins. And it's O'Malley who has the better finish rate overall, with an 80% finish rate as a pro, 12 of 15 wins inside the distance, while for Yan, it's 8 of 16, as he's got a 50% finish rate. Yan's never been finished as a pro. O'Malley's been finished in his only loss. The striking numbers, the metrics are better for O'Malley at the UFC level, but he's obviously not fighting even close to that same level of competition in comparison to Petr Yan here. Now, Yan has got an over 1.5 significant strike differential, which is excellent. But look at O'Malley. He's landing more than 4 significant strikes per minute more than his opponents do. So those are like Manon Fiorot numbers. Fantastic striking metrics right here for O'Malley, as he throws about 2.5 more significant strike attempts per minute than his opponents do, while Jan throws just a little bit more than his opponents do. O'Malley about 10% more accurate, just as powerful in terms of knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. And actually, Jan has been knocked down once, while Sean O'Malley's never been knocked down. And O'Malley even has the better defensive striking numbers here at almost 65% and compared to 61% for Jan. Now, they've done O'Malley favors, obviously. They've never put him up against anybody that wrestles at all. Even though some guys have tried takedowns against him, he's got 65% takedown defense. It's not bad. But he's keeping his fights standing at striking range about 90% of his 84 minutes in the UFC cage. So he's done a good job of keeping fights on the feet, where he's got that reach advantage, that height advantage, where he manages distance well, out volumes his opponents and outlands his opponents. Jan, 16 of 26 on his takedown attempts. So he's getting them at over a 60% clip. And his fights are staying standing about 75% of the time, while it's over 90% of the time for O'Malley. And, Jan outcontrols his opponents at about a 1.5 to 1 ratio. And showing 90% takedown defense is Petr Yan. So you got to believe, if there's one guy that's more likely to win minutes or initiate the wrestling exchanges here, it should be Petr Yan. And I think we can feel pretty safe that, he would be the guy to win minutes in the grappling exchanges in this fight. And then the strength to schedule, all Yan, as O'Malley has been given a very nice ride through the bantamweight division here. Even that Chris Montino fight. I mean, I don't remember who he was supposed to fight that day, but Montino was 45 steps down in competition from the guy he was supposed to fight. And that was an opponent that was handpicked by O'Malley. So now he's taking this step up against a guy like Petr Yan. And, while the metrics on paper tell a story that, O'Malley should be the better striker in this matchup, and that he's got that 5-inch reach advantage. He's supposedly 4 inches taller and 2 years younger than Petr Yan. How does that look? Because when we saw him take a step up from Raulian Paiva to Pedro Munoz, I saw a guy lose the first round to Munoz. I mean, he didn't do anything. And if you're afraid of Pedro Munoz, if you're afraid to engage with Pedro Munoz on the feet, what's going to happen when you're looking across from the Siberian madman, Petr Yan, the guy who broke Jose Aldo? The one real fight that O'Malley had was Marlon Vera, and he was done immediately. I think Petr Yan murders this kid. Murders him. I'm probably going to max bet him, but I'm waiting to see how this line goes. If Sean O'Malley won this fight, I would be fucking shocked.
Yeah. But hopefully the line keeps coming down, though, right?
Yeah.
Money's pouring in on Sean O'Malley. How low is this going to get for Petr Yan? We'll have to see. So they actually have props out on FanDuel Sportsbook as well. Let's see. Yan by murder is not on the prop list, Weezy, but Yan inside the distance is plus 200. Yan by decision is minus 110. Sean O'Malley inside the distance is plus 500. Sean O'Malley by decision plus 500. Any thoughts on any of these props? Do you think an inside the distance for Yan or a decision?
Yeah, I'm thinking inside the distance. Just because, we really don't know what O'Malley's ground game looks like. I'm assuming it's pretty good. He's been at the UFC level for 10 fights. We know he's making improvements there. We know he's a striker first and a grappler second, but so is Petr Yan, to be fair. So I do think that Petr Yan will get the finish, but it's only a 3-round fight. So, I think that is one of the reasons why we're seeing O'Malley get a little bit of steam here, because 5-round Petr Yan, I think we all can agree, maybe he's minus 500 in this spot. But 3-round Petr Yan, when Petr sometimes gets off to a little bit of a slow start, it makes this fight a lot closer.
Yep, I can agree. 5 round Petr Yan would be crazy against Sean O'Malley, especially. All right, we have 2 fights left. We are going to move on to the co-main event. Cannot wait for this one. We have Aljamain Sterling going against TJ Dillashaw. We have Sterling, who is 33 years old, 5'7" with a 71-inch reach. Dillashaw, 36 years old, 5'6" with a 67-inch reach. Dillashaw, 3 years older. Dillashaw with a 1-inch height disadvantage and a 4-inch reach disadvantage. Tail the tape in favor of Sterling there. Sterling is 5-0 in his last 5 fights. A decision win against Jimmy Rivera, a decision win against Pedro Munoz, a submission win against Corey Sandhagen, a disqualification win against Petr Yan, and then a decision win against Petr Yan. As far as TJ Dillashaw, he is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. A decision win against John Lineker, knockout win against Cody Garbrandt, another knockout win against Cody Garbrandt, a loss by knockout to Henry Cejudo, a big long layoff after that, came back against Corey Sandhagen and won a very close decision. Went back and watched that fight today. I thought Sandhagen won, but it was super close, and it was nice to see that, a lot of the things that make TJ Dillashaw were still there, like the forward pressure, the pace, the cardio, especially the volume. It's all still there with Dillashaw. And I really think Dillashaw can give Sterling some problems here. So a big thing with Dillashaw that stuck out to me is the takedown defense, 86% takedown defense. Not only that, more importantly, his get-up game. Dominic Cruz took him down 4 times. I don't think Dominic Cruz compiled even a minute of control time in that fight. Once TJ Dillashaw gets taken down, he's popping right back up. You can see it right on the screen for control time, only getting controlled 0.9, less than 1% of the time. So I like that for TJ Dillashaw. I like the forward pressure. The guy has unlimited cardio, great toughness. And I feel like this fight could potentially look a lot like the Sterling Yan fight, the first one, where, Yan was pressuring. Sterling kind of, started to slow down as the fight went on. And, it's tiring to get pressure to back up the entire fight. And that's kind of how I see it playing out. I see TJ Dillashaw coming forward the entire time, putting Sterling on his back foot. I think early on, it's definitely going to be competitive. Sterling has very good striking, but, as the fight goes on, what's it going to look like if Dillashaw's in his face the entire time? And I don't really see Sterling being able to take down and control Dillashaw. Like, nobody's ever been able to do it. Nobody's ever been able to get even a minute of control time against Dillashaw. So Sterling would have to be the very first one. So yeah, I'm kind of leaning with the dog here in Dillashaw. The only concern is he is 36 years old. I thought he looked okay in his return against Sandhagen, but he didn't look like he was in his prime or anything like that. And Sterling looked phenomenal his last time out against Petr Yan. Career best last time against Petr Yan. But I think stylistically, Dillashaw can pressure here, get this extended, and make it a very competitive fight. So we see Sterling as a pretty decent-sized favorite here, but I'm kind of leaning the dog here, but the age is my only concern. Weezy, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's a great fight. Aljo a little bit younger, a little bit taller, and a 4-inch reach advantage. So we love the measurables here for Aljo. 3 more fights in comparison to Dillashaw, and he's been a lot more active recently as well, as we really haven't seen TJ Dillashaw fight much at all recently. I mean, even the Sandhagen fight feels like it was over a year ago at this point. So Sterling's more experienced. He's right there with the experience level in terms of Dillashaw at the UFC level. 1 fight separates them. 5 minutes in the cage separates them. It's Dillashaw who's been the better finisher at the UFC level with a 62% finish rate compared to 39% for Aljo. And he's also been finished in 50% of his losses as Dillashaw, while for Sterling it's 33%. So the striking is Dillashaw. He's the much better striker. And, the grappling is going to be Sterling because he's the much more dangerous submission grappler, and he's looking to get on your back. But the question is can Aljamain Sterling win a round when the judges aren't completely fucking mentally retarded if the fight is on the feet? Because Petr Yan clearly won 3 out of 5 rounds on the feet in the last matchup, but for some reason, 2 of those 3 judges gave round 1 to Sterling somehow. I don't know why that happened, but Sterling's been losing a lot of striking exchanges lately, and I think that'll continue to happen against Dillashaw. And then he kind of got on Jan's back and just stayed there for 2 rounds, but really didn't do anything or threaten with anything. So I just don't know what Sterling's done well lately. I mean, Jan threw away 2 fights ago with an illegal knee. And then I think Jan clearly won 3 out of 5 rounds in the last one here. So where does Aljamain win? Does he have to have TJ trip so that he can get on his back again? Because his takedown accuracy is horseshit. It's less than 22%. And Dillashaw is stopping takedowns at 86.5% and is allowing less than 1% control time. That's 2.16 minutes that he's allowed in control time out of 216. So if Aljo is unable to get on this dude's back and blanket him and win some minutes there, I don't see how he wins minutes in this fight. When we look at the strength of schedule, little bit better ratio for Aljo, more experienced competition for Dillashaw. The wins, better for Aljo in the ratio, but a little bit more experienced competition for Dillashaw. Man, it's a very close fight, but I just got to say, I haven't been impressed with Aljamain Sterling other than getting on Jan's back for 2 rounds in the last fight. He's lost 7 out of the last 9 rounds that he's fought. And I think that this should be Dillashaw, but Dillashaw hasn't been active either. So I don't know if I can lay money on somebody who's had 1 fight in the last 3 years. And then the fight before that, he made an ill-advised cut down to 125 and got smoked. So, yeah, this is weird, man. I'm probably just going to be staying away from this one.
Yeah, I think I might take the dog shot here on Dillashaw. Like, this line just doesn't make a ton of sense. Unless, like, people are saying in the chat, like, unless Dillashaw is washed, then sure, it can make some sense. I just don't think he's washed yet. I think he's declined a little bit, but, you know, I don't think he's washed. Sterling opened at -220. He's currently -181. Dillashaw opened up +185. He's currently +156. That +156 is definitely calling my name. The fight goes decision around like -180. The fight doesn't go to decision, is +150. I'm kind of leaning the fight goes on this one.
Yeah, I don't really know what in terms of the metrics, because it's a 5-round fight, that always trips it up a little bit. But what do I have for lines here? Yeah, it looks like the prop template's liking the unders a little bit more because they're trying to shade you that way, because these guys have been going over quite a bit lately. Other than the Sterling fight against Sandhagen, most of these have went a little bit deeper lately. So, yeah, I'm staying away from this one as a whole. Just going to enjoy that fight because I think it's a good matchup.
It is going to be a very, very fun matchup, including this main event, the fight of the year. I mean, I can't think of another fight that was this exciting. We have Charles Oliveira going against Islam Makhachev. We have Oliveira, 32 years old, 5'10", with a 74-inch reach. Makhachev, 30 years old, 5'10", with a 70-inch reach. It's going to be Islam with a 2-year age gap there, younger there. And it's going to be Oliveira with a 4-inch reach advantage. Oliveira is 5-0 in his last 5 fights, a submission win against Kevin Lee, a decision win against Tony Ferguson, a knockout win against Michael Chandler, a submission win against Dustin Poirier, a submission win against Justin Gaethje. Islam Makhachev, he is 5-0 in his last 5 fights as well. A decision win against Davi Ramos, a submission win against Drew Dober, submission win against Thiago Moises, submission win against Dan Hooker, and a knockout win against Bobby Green. This is such an intriguing fight because we have not seen somebody try to take down Oliveira in a very, very long time. The last person to try to do so was Kevin Lee, and ended up getting submitted in the 3rd round. Prior to that, like Paul Felder was able to get him down, pound him out with ground and pound. But it's been a while since somebody has been trying to take down Charles Oliveira, because typically people are not trying to do that. But Islam Makhachev is going to do that, and he's more than comfortable with taking down Charles Oliveira. So I'm curious to see how this plays out on the mat. I think, Islam will be able to get takedowns, whenever he wants. But Oliveira is very dangerous off of his back. He's very active off of his back as well. On the feet, I think Islam's a very good striker. I really do. But Charles Oliveira is super dangerous. The guy has so much power, like very deceiving power. Went out there and, knocked out Michael Chandler. Went out there and was hurting Dustin Poirier on the feet. He hurt Justin Gaethje with the very first punch that landed. A very tough guy in Gaethje. I was able to clip him, drop him, and submit him. So I don't know if Islam's going to want to really mess around on the feet. I think Islam tries to get this fight down to the mat early and often. And like I said, when it hits the ground, I think it's going to get very interesting. This is a fight where I want nothing to do with the side. I like violence here. This is a Charles Oliveira fight, and that means violence. He has like 30 fights in the UFC. Only a handful have even went to the third round. He's never seen a fourth round as far as I'm concerned. I think this is Oliveira early, or I think it's Islam. Could also be early as well, but as the fight goes on, especially if Islam's able to have success on top, I feel like Islam can eventually get him out of there. But I like violence here. I max bet the under, I think it was either 3.5 or 4.5 in Oliveira's last fight against Justin Gaethje. Talk about no sweat. I think this one's going to go a little bit further, but I still think it finishes. I think the fight doesn't go to decisions. A great look. The under 4.5, under 3.5. If you want to get even like under 2.5, I don't even mind. But I think this fight does finish inside the distance. That's my look. In terms of picking a side, it's tough because Charles Oliveira is so dangerous on the feet and on the mat. But I feel like Islam definitely has the path to get this fight down to the mat and eventually get the finish in his own right. But I think somebody's getting finished here, Weezy.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. 42 fights as a pro for Charles Oliveira, and 88.1% of them have finished inside the distance. And at the UFC level, it's 26 of 30 fights that have finished inside the distance. And he's never seen the full 5 rounds before. He's only seen the full 3 rounds. So definitely like violence in this one. We got Charles Oliveira's got a 4-inch reach advantage. Islam's a southpaw. So on the feet, an orthodox versus southpaw matchup could tell us that we're going to see both guys' power strikes be open for business, but this is probably going to be a grappling match. Oliveira, in his 30 UFC fights, has been in control time positions about 58% of the time. And for Islam Makhachev, it's about 62% of the time. So, if you add up these guys' UFC cage time together, about 6 out of 10 seconds are taking place on the cage or on the mat. And I think that this is probably going to be the case on this one too, because I don't think Islam Makhachev wants anything to do with anybody's striking at this level, especially Charles Oliveira, who's very dangerous and very powerful, as he's landed 7 knockdowns in 30 UFC fights, while Islam Makhachev actually does have 2 knockdowns in 11 fights. Better fit knockdowns per 15 minutes for Oliveira, a little bit better striking accuracy for Makhachev, much better striking defense. Makhachev, in a 110-minute sample size, is absorbing less than 1 significant strike per minute. So that's just amazing. This guy is a master of defense. He's out-controlling his opponents at a 5.5 to 1 ratio, while for Oliveira, it's about 1 to 1. He's getting his takedowns at a 66% clip. He's averaging 3.4 per 15 minutes, and that's with guys never getting back up. And he still gets that many takedowns, and then 1.23 submission attempts per 15 minutes. But Oliveira, not to be outdone, getting his at a 41% clip, 2.5 per 15 minutes, and 2.9 submission attempts per 15 minutes. So he's very, very active, getting the fight to the ground and then trying to end it. And if you take down Charles, like we saw in the very first Charles Oliveira fight at the UFC level, Darren Elkins goes in, shoots for a double leg, gets him down, and then is wrapped up in a triangle 15 seconds later. So if you take down Charles, you're putting yourself into spots where he's going to be very dangerous, and he's very dangerous on the feet. That's why his fights almost never go to decision, is because the dude is literally dangerous everywhere. So who's the better grappler? Is it Charles Oliveira with his submission grappling, or is it Islam Makhachev with his control time and his position over submission grappling, which then eventually leads to a submission as he wears down his opponent? If we look at the strength of schedule here, Oliveira is fighting the much more experienced competition, but other than that, it's very close in the ratio. So this is the best fight of the year, in my opinion. A guy in Islam Makhachev who's the master of Russian MMA, a guy who's a submission threat, but wins a ton of minutes with his grappling exchanges and frustrates strikers. And then you got a guy like Oliveira who just brings chaos, who's dangerous everywhere that the fight goes, and is constantly looking to finish in a killer-be-killed fighter. Rooting for Charles, but my brain is telling me that it's going to be Islam that gets the job done here. Can't wait for this one, man.
I can't wait for it either. So I was doing some numbers here. Only 4 times has Charles Oliveira went over 2.5 rounds in the UFC. Only 4. That's 30 fights. Only 4 times, and the one time it just squeaked over by a couple seconds. So, I think violence is the way to go. instead of, betting a winner here. I like Makhachev, but I'm not laying chalk on him. I think Oliveira is, super live against. He's the most dangerous fighter in the division. Makhachev opened up minus 300. My goodness, he's currently minus 181. Oliveira opened up plus 250. Is currently plus 156 there. The fight doesn't go. Best price minus 350. Fight goes decision plus 245. The fight goes decision is plus 300 on DraftKings. I saw a lot of people in the chat liking that fight goes. I personally think it does finish inside the distance. I'm thinking like second or third round. But yeah, I like violence here, and I'm not betting aside. I think Charles Oliveira is super alive, just because he's dangerous everywhere.
Absolutely. I can't wait, man. I mean, these guys are similar in age, similar size. Charles got that reach advantage, that experience advantage, that submission grappling advantage, but, and the power, the striking advantages, but just Islam is so good at controlling his opponents and using his grappling to win minutes that, I feel like the best move here is bet on Islam to win and root for Charles, because, if Islam wins, you cash the bet. But if Charles wins, I think the UFC fans wins. They get what's the much more exciting champion and the guy that, provides the much more exciting fights.
Yep, I feel like everybody or most people will be rooting for Charles Oliveira, including me. I love Charles Oliveira, and I love making money on his fights, and that's because I bet violence a lot in his fights. Just like Jordan Wright. Shout out to Jordan Wright. Actually, no, screw you, Jordan Wright. What are you doing? Not cashing that under for the first time in your career, thinking you're a wrestler. So yeah, that happened last night. But other than that, I like betting on violence in Jordan Wright fights and Charles Oliveira fights and Malcolm Gordon fights. So yeah, this is a very good fight, Weezy. A fight of the year, card of the year. Every single fight is phenomenal. The worst fight on the card is probably, I don't know, like the Tukhugov Almeida fight. Even that fight's going to be exciting because Almeida's in it. Like the Hosa Landsberg fight maybe, but even that fight's going to be fun. I mean, this card is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's amazing. We deserve it after 2 out of 3 weeks off, a couple weeks ago, and then the 2 straight women's main events with Grasso Araujo and Aljamain versus Dern. Here we go, man. Now it's time to party. UFC 280 is upon us.
It is indeed going to be a party. So yeah, guys, we did it. We went through all 14 fights. Thank you so much for hanging out. Feels good to be back on the Pub Sports main channel. Weezy, let the people know where they can find you and what you have going on throughout the week.
Yeah, so you can find me tomorrow on Pub Sports Radio for the Die Hard MMA podcast with my guy Clint. I am going to be the guest on that. And then you can find me on Probability after the Die Hard MMA podcast with my guy Brady on the MMA Engine YouTube channel. Tuesday night, 10 o'clock Central Time. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Uncle Weezy, where we're going to do Just the Tip with Uncle Weezy. We're going to break down all 14 of these fights, finish with Uncle Weezy's ass shaving of the week. And then on Wednesday night, I'm going to be going live with the Couch Warrior. And I think we've got Liam Picks fights. I think we got Wiz. I think we got Addicted to Combat. It's a great panel. So it's a big week of content for me. I'm going to be all over the damn place. You'll be able to find me just about anywhere. And let's stack cash tickets like flapjacks for UFC 280. We deserve it.
Let's do it. So yeah, I did post a early prediction video on my channel for the main event. Go check that out if you guys have not already. Full card breakdown should be out tomorrow. And I'm thinking about maybe doing like another, quick breakdown on maybe the Dillashaw fight or the O'Malley fight as well within the next couple hours as well. So yeah, follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers, Instagram, DFS by the numbers here. Catch me here on Pub Sports Radio. Catch me on the MMA Engine and catch me on at DFS by the numbers YouTube. Thank you all for hanging out. Leave a like on your way out. Subscribe to the channel. And we will see you back here on Pub Sports Radio on Wednesday for the DFS show with Weezy, Monk, and MMA Gordo. Talk to you guys soon. Best of luck for UFC 280.